Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Revolution. And we do have a World War III alert. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, wasn't able to go live yesterday. Had a lot of business to take care of, family, friends, community business. Tomorrow I will be posting pictures as we are dealing with the community and feeding the homeless. I will let y'all enjoy some of that. But today we have to get into NATO has chosen the next location for World War III, Syria, as they help Al-Qaeda, as they help the terrorists, these same terrorists that was in on killing Gaddafi and selling Black people. These same terrorists, they just moving from Africa to the Middle East, Asia. But since the ceasefire has happened in Syria, now Israel and the U.S. is working with Al-Qaeda to cripple the Russians in Syria. You see, World War III could absolutely happen over Syria.
The joint siege of the Syrian Arab Army, along with the Russian armed forces, against various units of the rebel forces against the Syrian government, has begun following their attacks on the Syrian army. On November 27th, the rebels in Idlib launched their major attack around the western areas of Aleppo province in northeastern Syria. The timing of the attack just hours after Netanyahu's warning to Assad about playing with fire for supporting the Palestinian and Lebanese struggles, indicating a broader geopolitical strategy coinciding with the ceasefire agreement in Lebanon. As in the footage, the rebel forces attacked the Syrian army with heavy weapons and manpads. Furthermore, additional reinforcements of special forces from the Syrian Arab Army arrived at the gates of Aleppo to stop them. The video reportedly shows the Syrian army's MLRS now shots fire, hitting Allied militias positions from the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, who are advancing in Aleppo. This is to stop the extremist rebels who violated the de-escalation agreement, started operations that endanger civilians, and have reportedly captured the village of Zerba from the Assad army in the area. Western media use the term Syrian opposition in the context of the conflict in Syria, and this attack as the occupation by the Assad militias, who defeated the threat of the rebels for now, along with Russian forces with heavy artillery fire. In addition, it was reported that the Syrian Arab Army was involved in fierce clashes with al-Nusra rebel units, while the joint Russian-Syrian Air Force also took action in the town of Atari. Aviation prepared for bombing strikes, which hit rebel positions as they advanced west of Aleppo city. According to Syrian sources today on November 28, more than 200 al-Nusra rebels have been neutralized since the offensive began. Regardless of whether Aleppo falls or not, the city has fallen before to President Assad, and the possibility of returning Idlib to Syrian government control is currently being discussed.
So here we have the terrorists rising up in Syria to attack the Russians and the great revolutionary leader Assad, the Christian savior. Remember, Assad is protecting the Christians in Syria. So those head choppers, that's fighting him, they want to kill the Christians, and the U.S. is helping them hunt down Christians and behead them. That's a fact.
Welcome back, Professor.
Thank you very much for inviting me again.
Let's get started with this temporary ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel. Many people are asking right now why they have decided to go after a ceasefire when we're having a difficult situation in Gaza, and the situation in Gaza is not solved. What would be your response to this question?
Well, the resistance in Lebanon, they began, as we all know, on October the 8th last year, uh, shelling and striking border positions between Palestine and Lebanon in order to pull part of the Israeli military to the north and to prevent them from all going to Gaza. Because we all recall at that time the genocidal intent of the Israeli regime had become clear. They were calling Palestinians Amalek. The Minister of Defense or Minister of Genocide uh, said that they're going to cut off water, medicine, fuel, electricity, food, everything from Gaza. In other words, they wanted to starve the population. And the president of the regime said that there are no innocents in Gaza, and thus condemning everyone to death and starvation. So Hezbollah, in order to prevent that from happening and to help the resistance in Gaza, it began this conflict. It was a limited conflict, of course, and it continued, and it had huge impact. The Israeli regime was very angry. It displaced, there are different estimates, but probably somewhere between 80 to 150,000 people from northern Palestine. And that made things very difficult for the regime. Then, of course, we had the assassinations, the pager terror attack, which also injured the Iranian ambassador.
Loot soldier.
And we also had the assassination of Sayed Hassan Nasrallah and Mr. Safieddin. And then the onslaught. The regime began an invasion of Lebanon, which failed. The Israeli regime failed on all accounts. However, we have to keep into account that the price that Lebanon has paid over, especially the last 2 months, is very high. Hezbollah, from the very beginning, kept the people of Lebanon out of this fight. For over 11 months, for almost a year, they kept this as a border conflict. And as a result, they gave more martyrs than they would have ordinarily, because they had to keep their fighters near the border, giving the Israeli regime greater opportunity to hit Hezbollah commandos and soldiers. And that was because Lebanon is a very complicated country. There are different religions, different sects. All these Beirut is full of Western embassies that are constantly conspiring against the resistance. You have lots of Western NGOs and Western institutions all conspiring against the resistance. And you have militias or former militias that are still armed, such as the Lebanese forces and others, which always conspire against Hezbollah. The head of the Lebanese forces and the Lebanese forces, the leaders itself, were among the people who carried out the Sabra and Shatila massacre, killing 3,500 Palestinians and Lebanese Shias in 1982 when the Israeli regime invaded the country and captured Beirut. They carried out this massacre with the Israelis. And these mass murderers are allies of Western embassies. So Hezbollah has to fight knowing that there's a dagger back there, and that they have to be careful not to be stabbed in the back. So it's not like Gaza, where at least in Gaza, Hamas and its allies, they have control of Gaza itself. In Lebanon, that's not the case. They are both external players and internal players. And so when the Israeli invasion began, Hezbollah was in a very difficult position. Its senior commanders and of course, Sayyid Hassan was martyred. They were martyred. And the Israelis, as in Gaza, they were targeting civilians. They were bombing cities, carpet bombing cities, towns, villages, especially communities that are supporters of the resistance, and those communities that were helping the refugees. The Israelis seem to be looking for ways to carry out crimes in a new way. They're being innovative in their evilness. It's unbelievable the sort of things that they would hunt down medics across Lebanon. They'd be searching for medics to kill them, and ambulance drivers. Not just bombing one if they happen to be there. They hunt for them across the country. So the people were under a great deal of pressure. And also, during these 2 months, there was a major conspiracy. They were conspiring against Hezbollah. The Western embassies, these NGOs, these institutions, these militias, they were working hard to undermine the resistance. They failed, fortunately, but this sort of pressure existed. So ultimately, I think Hezbollah accepted. Well, actually, Hezbollah has not accepted the ceasefire. Hezbollah has neither accepted or rejected the ceasefire. But a ceasefire has been accepted by the Lebanese side, which effectively means things are as they were before the 8th of October last year. Now, there's some small changes, but it's all manageable. To the south of the Litani River, Hezbollah never had arms before. There always was the army, and there was UNIFIL. Hezbollah's presence to the south of the river was always underground. And to the north, just like it is now, their presence was more open. So, but even to the north of the river, it's basically their key assets are all underground. So the Israeli regime has gained absolutely nothing. They've had some token changes in the agreement simply to say that we got something so that they could convince their people that they got something. But we have to keep in mind.
Salute, Quinn.
So when it comes to Lebanon and the Israeli regime, it's a victory for Hezbollah, hands down, no doubt. But despite the fact that they slaughtered civilians and that the Hezbollah also gave martyrs, but they won because the regime failed. Well, despite Western support, despite the fact that you had American and German and British spies and ships and drones and planes working 24 hours a day, the Five Eyes, everyone working with the Israeli regime. Despite all that, Hezbollah won, hands down. But obviously, it's not ideal. There are those who raise the question about the linking, let's say, of the battle in Lebanon and Gaza. There are a couple of things that can be said. One is that Hezbollah has not accepted the ceasefire, as I said. It has neither accepted or rejected it. It's done neither. Why is that significant? Because the Israeli regime will have to keep a very significant number of troops on the border, and especially during the next couple of months, but even afterwards, because Hezbollah has not taken a stance, and there's always a chance that the ceasefire will collapse or it won't be extended. And as we speak, Hezbollah is preparing. It is rearming itself. It's building new tunnels. It's working very swiftly to uh, make up for any shortcomings it had and to meet the needs of this type of warfare that they experienced over the last couple of months. And the Israeli regime knows that. So they're going to have to keep large amounts of their forces in the north. In addition to that, the Israeli regime and Hezbollah, both of them are constantly going to be looking to the sky because within, uh, I think, during Biden's presidency, and this is my own interpretation, this is my analysis, it's not based on evidence, but the Iranian operation against Israel will be carried out. Iran will not wait for a new president. This genocide and these attacks were carried out during the Biden years. The attack on Iran, the attacks on Iran, the violation of Iranian sovereignty were carried out during the Biden presidency. So my belief is that the Iranian strike will be soon, and it will be very significant. It will be much more significant than the previous strike. And I think the impact of it will be greater than uh, the battles that we've seen so far. And also, I think, in addition to that, uh, is the fact that the Israeli regime, again, in my opinion, will still be well, not in my opinion, it will still be directly in conflict with the other members of the Axis, not just Iran, which will carry out the operation against the Israeli regime, but also the resistance in Iraq and the resistance in Yemen. In other words, the gates to the Red Sea will remain closed, and drone and missile strikes from Yemen and Iraq will continue. Perhaps they will even increase, but we'll have to see. So this is something that the regime will have to take into consideration during the coming weeks if they want to intensify their attacks on Gaza. And should also add that I have no doubt that the Iranians will continue to supply the resistance in Gaza in any way or form possible, and that is what they are doing. Uh, they have their ways, and I don't know how it's done, but they continue to support Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and their allies wherever they may be.
You mentioned the way that Hezbollah and Iranians and the people on the part of Gazans are thinking of this ceasefire. And how about the other part, the Israelis? Why have they decided to go with a ceasefire? What's the situation for them? How do you find their current state of?
Now that question is what we see happening right now. The reason the Israelis and NATO and the small hats, the reason they chose to have a ceasefire in Lebanon is so that they can side with Al Qaeda and ISIS in Syria and attack the Russians and attack Assad and kill the Christians. You see, that is what, because they had the ceasefire the next day, the terrorists started going crazy in Syria, but they got it under control. But that's their plan. Back to terrorists while they try to rearm, regroup, and find more small hats to go fight in Israel because they've been losing so many soldiers. A lot of people don't even want to fight. See, they have a manpower shortage in Israel and in Ukraine right now.
Their army, their political parties, their political attitude toward Lebanon.
I think there are a number of issues here. One is I think that that Biden is putting pressure on the Israeli regime, although I don't think everyone would agree with that. And I do think that Biden is angry with Netanyahu, and so is much of the deep state. And that deep state in the United States includes many Zionists. Uh, I think they're angry because Netanyahu was a reason for their defeat in the presidential election and in Congress and in the Senate. To what degree did it have an impact on their defeat? That is, I think, somewhat subjective. There are ways to figure that out to a degree. But what can be said is that it was a significant reason for their defeat. There are other reasons, but this was one. And so I think some of them wanted to punish him. I think they would like to see him fall. They would like to see the regime preserved, but I think there are many people who would like to see him fall. And Netanyahu is under a lot of criticism because the Channel 13 poll in Israel, which I tweeted, uh, in that poll, 61% of those polled believed that the Israelis didn't win. Only 26% believed that they won. That's a that's very significant. And Netanyahu has been attacked from people across the board very severely. So it's hurt Netanyahu, and that's why I think that this may have something to do with it. But also, the regime is overextended. It's the military is very tired. They're overextended. True, the Americans are covering all their costs. They're giving them whatever uh, needs they have, whether it's ammunition or weapons or aid or loans or whether it's political cover. I mean, even after the arrest warrants were issued, the ICC warrants, no one has been sanctioned. No one has stopped supplying Israel. The West is carrying out business as usual. And Netanyahu is carrying out a genocide not on his own. It's the political apparatus, it's the military, and the West continues to work with him, the military, and the political apparatus. So, but despite all that, the regime is exhausted. People are exhausted. The economy has collapsed. Israel is hated across the world. Its image has been tarnished, and Hezbollah has done an extraordinary job on the battlefield. After 2 months, the Israelis really got nowhere. And the deeper they would go in, the more dangerous it became for them because what Hezbollah's biggest strength would be to constantly ambush the Israeli soldiers once they're deep inside Lebanon. That is what all these networks of tunnels are for. The Israelis never really got that far to get the real punishment. So they're exhausted. They were humiliated on the battlefield. Ordinary Israelis don't know this because they are fed regime propaganda, and Western media uh, simply repeats Israeli propaganda. I was speaking to a very well known journalist just yesterday, a Western journalist who's Jewish, but critical of Israel, um, someone who you would know. And he was telling me that in London, in Washington, everyone believes the narrative that the Israelis destroyed Iran's air defenses and destroyed Iran's missile defense capabilities, and that Iran really is completely vulnerable now, and that we should go in and strike and take care of Iran, despite the fact that the air assault was a failure. Anyone who studies the situation or has been in Iran or just a witness in Tehran itself would recognize that their main objective was Parchin and nothing happened. But uh, in the West, they believe the propaganda, and of course, Israelis believe their own propaganda, even though they're giving casualties and life is getting difficult. But at least for now, they're still under the influence. But the armed forces is exhausted, and people across the world were watching the Israelis fail. Those countries that would purchase Israeli weapons, those people in the region who thought that the Israeli regime was invincible. And of course, the Israelis would bomb apartment blocks, slaughter ordinary families, and that would outrage people, create outrage across the world, just like in Gaza. But then they'd see them be defeated on the battlefield, and they would see them still stuck on the border, and that was humiliating for the regime. And the more damaged their image becomes, the more vulnerable the regime becomes, because people across the region then start asking questions. People in Turkey say, Mr. Erdogan, why are you not doing anything? This is not a regime that's as strong as you thought, or that we thought, or why does King Abdullah of Jordan do nothing when the regime is failing in Lebanon, and so on. So it creates a lot of damage for the regime, and I think they needed this ceasefire. So in a sense, Hezbollah, because of the complexities of Lebanon, they remain silent right now. Again, they haven't accepted or rejected the ceasefire, but the Israelis did need it because of their own problems.
Do you think that right after this, when they were talking in Israel about this ceasefire with Lebanon, Netanyahu said something different, that they want to focus on Iran, and how we can interpret the way that he's talking right now about Iran? Is that related to what's going on right now in Syria, or it's something beyond that?
Well, that is an important point. It is very interesting that a major attack has been carried out in Syria, and obviously there is coordination between Erdogan and Netanyahu, because this attack is in the interest of Netanyahu to weaken Syria, to weaken the bridge for the axis of resistance. And Erdogan has shown that he is no enemy of Netanyahu. He has refused to halt the uh, Baku oil from going to Israel. Those who say it's the oil of Azerbaijan, he has more than enough influence over Aliyev to make him stop. There's no doubt about that. And after Netanyahu was declared to be a war criminal, carrying out crimes against humanity by the ICC, he had that excuse to halt the flow of oil, but he refused to do so. Trade continues despite claims otherwise. There's very strong evidence of that. And the political relationship exists. So the timing of uh, the terrorists, these terror groups in Idlib, to restart this dirty war against Syria is is very significant. It's very important. So that is a part of it. I think that the Israelis want to weaken Syria so that if there is conflict again in Lebanon, that it would be more difficult for the resistance. And also, Syria is supporting the Palestinians in the West Bank. That would make it all the more difficult for them as well. There's no doubt that that's true. With regards to a direct attack between Israel and Iran, Hezbollah really doesn't play a role, because these would be airstrikes and missile strikes that Iran would carry out, or the Israeli regime would carry out, and that has nothing to do with what is going on in what was going on the border between Palestine and Lebanon. So I think that this is quite probable. It is quite probable that what is going on in Syria is linked to what Netanyahu was saying.
I think what's going on in Syria is so important and significant, because you look at these people who are, we'll call it Jabhat al-Nusra, it's something like this. And
That's right.
the way that you see the people, these are not Syrians. Most of them coming from, we've learned, I saw a video that they were talking in Tajik, in Persian, and these are the same people. If you remember that terrorist attack in Crocus town hall in Russia, they were Tajiks and they did that terrorist attack. These are people who have been used by, they said in those days, they said it was ISIS-K. And right now in Idlib, in Aleppo, and they're doing the same thing. These are not Syrians. They have Syrians in their group, but other nationalities as well. And it's not a coincidence, right after, in the day that they have announced this a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, and we're having a new conflict, a new tension coming up in Syria. How do you see? Because right now, I think what's happening between Iran and Russia is so important in terms of what's going on in Syria, in terms of what's happening right now in Syria. Do you think that Iran and Russia would cooperate even closer with what, considering what's going on there?
You are absolutely correct. This is a multinational terrorist organization or series of terrorist organizations. You have Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which was Jabhat al-Nusra before. You have a coalition of different groups, large numbers of Chinese nationals, large numbers of people from Central Asia, including the Tajiks that you were speaking about, large numbers of people from uh, countries in North Africa and Asia in general. And these are the people that Mr. Erdogan has been supporting for 12, 13 years now. The rise of Al Qaeda or Al Qaeda in Syria was beginning of the dirty war that the Americans with NATO and Erdogan and oil and gas-rich countries in the Persian Gulf and Jordan and Israel were carried out. They began it in 2011, and it reached its height in after 2013, where they brought in tens of thousands of foreign fighters. They were funded, and their travel to Syria was facilitated by Turkey and Jordan, but Turkey mostly. Many of them came from Europe as well, and Western intelligence agencies let them go. And the same thing happened, by the way, in Libya, um, in 2011. But in Syria, it was a very long-term project. So these people have been, uh, some of them have been in Syria for well over a decade now. And Mr. Erdogan has, these different groups often clash with each other, they kill each other, they fight in Idlib. But it's clear that Mr. Erdogan has organized them, and now they've carried out this major assault, and the timing is extraordinary. Without a doubt, it will anger the Russians because the area which they attacked was controlled by the Syrian army, and it was also a place where Russian forces were also based, and a number of Russians apparently have been murdered. The Iranian supported groups or the Iranians, they are not in that region, but I think Hezbollah is going to send some of its troops there, from what I've heard, and probably others will too. There will be reinforcements. Right now, the Russians are heavily bombing those areas, and so are the Syrians. But yes, I think it will be another reason for the Russians and the Iranians to work more closely with each other. And I think it further exposes um, the true nature of the dirty war in Syria, because during the previous years, there was a lot of misinformation and disinformation about Syria. And most people were very hostile, ordinary people were very hostile towards Syria because they didn't see the nature of the dirty war. The Western media was never telling the truth. If someone said something about it in Western media, they would be no longer invited. I remember Professor Sachs, I think, once went on MSNBC and explained that this is a dirty war. But these were very rare occasions when people would come and tell the truth in 2013, 14. And of course, the media in our part of the world, the Arabic media, is controlled by these dictatorships, and they were uh, promoting sectarian language and sectarianism in order to undermine the Syrian government, because the Syrian government was the only government that was resisting Israel. All of these regimes were moving closer to Israel. Turkey had normalized with Israel. And so the media was very hostile towards the Syrian government. All of the lies about chemical weapons, they were universally accepted in the media. But what happened over the last year has exposed everything. Unless people are, hell bent on preserving their old views, everyone sees that those people who carried out the dirty war in Syria are the ones who are supporting Israel, and they're the ones who are unwilling to do anything against the Israeli regime. And whereas the Syrians are supporting the resistance, whether in Palestine or in Lebanon. And this attack, I think, reinforces that. The timing is stunning. Literally hours after the battle begins or ends in Lebanon, or at least we have a ceasefire, or at least a cessation of hostilities, because again, Hezbollah has not accepted anything at the moment. Then we have this huge battle. It's obvious that Mr. Erdogan and whoever's helping him in the region, that they've been preparing for a very long time to carry out this major assault.
What are the main differences between Bashar al-Assad and Erdogan? Why they couldn't achieve any sort of agreement so far?
Well, first of all, Erdogan is a part of NATO, and he's kept Turkey in NATO, and he has no intention of leaving the Western camp. He speaks about BRICS and uh, maybe, yeah, and also the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and independent policies, but he hasn't really moved in that direction. His support for Palestine is basically giving some Palestinian scholarships and letting them study in Turkish universities, and to allow some of the Hamas officials to stay in their country, which benefits him more than it benefits them, because this is basically what the West also does. They give scholarships. They use that soft power to strengthen their hand. They create a good environment for people. But when Hamas needs their help in Gaza, he's still selling the oil and doing business and preserving ties. In Erdogan has ambitions over Syria. Syria and much of the region used to be a part of the Ottoman Empire and the Ottoman sphere of influence. And Erdogan would like to see a revival of that. And his allies in Syria were a tool for that. And Erdogan did expect that Syria would collapse with all the foreign fighters that he brought in and all the weapons that he was sending in through countries with the funding from the Persian Gulf region, with NATO support. He expected to win, and he failed. And now he has a problem. On the one hand, has caused a burden because there are many refugees. Also, these extremists are dangerous. They're dangerous for Turkey. Uh, in Istanbul, they have a presence, and my Turkish friends always express concern about these groups and what they could possibly do inside Turkey or Turkey. And but also, he has a problem. On the one hand, he can't get rid of them, because if he does, it'll cause trouble at home. And on the other hand, they can be a useful tool for him to gain concessions from the Syrian government, because the Syrian government wants Turkey to withdraw its troops in order to normalize, which is a very reasonable condition. Mr. Erdogan wants to normalize without withdrawing his troops and without withdrawing those terror organizations that he supports. So uh, while Turkey needs to have normalization, um, Erdogan is imposing conditions that are simply unacceptable for Syria, and by carrying out this assault, he hopes to put pressure on the Syrian government so that it would change its terms for negotiations. And on the other hand, Israelis have their own reasons to do this. So their interests coincide with one another. And of course, other countries in the region that have in the past supported these extremists have their own reasons as well. The very fact that the axis of resistance has succeeded so far, despite all the genocide, has hurt these regimes in the region that are pro-Western among their own people, and in the eyes of the and in the eyes of regional public opinion, and in the eyes of people across the world who are opposed to genocide. So they would like to see Syria undermined and hurt and punished for the role that it played, which caused them all to look very bad.
I think one of the main questions right now would be why now? Why are they trying to attack Syria right now? And we have to come back to the conflict in the southern Lebanon and the way that the Syrian government was helping Lebanese people and Hezbollah. It seems that in the eyes of Israelis, as long as the Syrian government is helping Hezbollah, they're not capable of just destroying or damaging or making some sort of defeat and inflicting some sort of defeat on Hezbollah. That's why it seems to me that right after this ceasefire, they're going after the government in Syria. And it's so unbelievable. And how, as you mentioned, Erdogan just talking, he's not happy with the situation in Lebanon, in Gaza, but at the end of the day, what he's doing right now is in favor of Israel because he knows
I,
how important Syria is for Hezbollah.
and it's not just Lebanon. The Israeli regime wants to annex the occupied West Bank. And while King Abdullah of Jordan, like Erdogan, is cooperating very closely with the Israeli regime, uh, Syria is helping the occupied West Bank, despite efforts, at least through Syria, I should say, the Palestinians in the West Bank are receiving support, despite the efforts of the Jordanian regime to be Israel's border guard. And so, if the regime wants to annex the West Bank and carry out major assaults, they would want to see Palestinians in the West Bank in a much weaker position. So, that I think is also true. Mr. Erdogan, just as he in the north has been basically helping the Israeli regime, he hasn't sent a single bullet to Gaza nor to Lebanon, but he is arming these terrorists to carry out assaults in Syria with the most advanced technology. But in a sense, the same is happening in Jordan. Jordan, when the Israelis want to bomb Iran, they facilitate their air campaign. They allow the Americans to use their airspace. They allow the British to use their airspace. But also, and when the Iranians want to strike back, they facilitate the Western governments in their defense of the Israeli regime. But also, a lot of the Israeli airstrikes on Syria go through Jordan. They fly through Jordan and then go over the area occupied by the Americans, and then they go towards Aleppo, the place which is under attack. A lot of the airstrikes that the Israeli regime carries out against Syria are very far from the border area. They are near Aleppo, and now we know, and now we see that the attacks being carried out by Mr. Erdogan's groups and militias are towards Aleppo.
Yeah. And how do you see the role of Russia right now in terms of the way, because they have some sort of relationship and a different relationship because it's somehow strange between Russia and Turkey because the way that Turkey was helping Ukraine during this conflict in Ukraine and Russia tried to keep the relationship between the two countries. But right now in Syria, they're against each other. They're literally against each other. And do you see any sort of political movement on the part of Russia to convince Erdogan and his party and his people to just not attacking the way that they're trying to do it right now? We know how the timing is important right now. And everything, it seems, it, the way that Erdogan is playing, as you mentioned, is in favor of Israel. But how Russia can play a significant role, in your opinion?
I think this is going to definitely hurt the relationship because Russian soldiers have been killed and they've been humiliated online. And I think they've also taken prisoners, although I haven't seen the footage myself. So this is Mr. Erdogan's responsibility. These militia groups, these Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and the others, all of these groups can only get their logistical support through Turkey because they're to the south, east, and west, it's Syria and Syrian forces. Everything comes from Turkey. So Turkish military, the Turkish intelligence, they do everything. And so this is a Turkish government issue. This is Mr. Erdogan's little army that's fighting in Syria. So they can't escape responsibility. But also the footage that has come out, including footage of Chinese nationals, Central Asian nationals, these are not going to help Turkey because people in these countries are going to look and say, Mr. Erdogan is creating extremism with our nationals, And these people can come back home to our country to create death and destruction. So across Central Asia, governments will be concerned. The Chinese government will be concerned. The Russian government, not just because of the murder of Russian soldiers, but because of the possibility of terror attacks being carried out in Russia by these people, they are concerned. One of the problems that Mr. Erdogan has, morality aside, which he doesn't seem to have uh, he doesn't seem to have any moral compass. But many people used to praise him and say that Erdogan plays it very smart. He tilts to the east, he tilts to the west. One day he's with Americans, and the next day he's with the Russians, and he does a deal with the Iranians, and he's with the Israelis. But in the long run, this creates distrust. No one is going to trust you. One reason why the axis of resistance is so effective is because they trust each other. Iran will never forsake Hamas. Iran will never forsake Ansarallah. Iran will never forsake Hezbollah or Islamic Jihad or the Hashid. Iran will help them under all different situations. Iran is arming them as we speak. I say this, of course, as a person who doesn't have any confidential information, but it's clear. So, and that is a huge burden for Iran. Iran will not back down. Iran will not sacrifice them. Uh, and this coming strike against the Israeli regime, although it will be a retaliation for Israeli aggression, but it will be to help the Palestinians. It will be to help the resistance, and it is costly for Iran. So one reason why the axis of resistance is so strong is because they trust each other, is because they have faith in each other. They won't. But no one is going to trust Mr. Erdogan. Russia will never trust him. Iran cannot trust him. Syria cannot trust him. The Europeans cannot trust him. No one can trust him. And that, I think, is very hurtful for Turkey. And I think that while he was an effective leader during his first decade in power, after that, I think things have changed, and for Turkey, and not just economically, but socially, and also for the image of Turkey because of Mr. Erdogan. Ordinary Turks are very supportive of the Palestinian cause, very supportive from all political persuasions, but their government does not reflect their sentiments.
As we talk, we've learned that an Egyptian delegation arrives in Israel today to talk about the ceasefire in Gaza. And how do you see the possibility of having a ceasefire in Gaza? And what would that mean? Because, as you've mentioned, the situation with the West Bank and with the northern part of Gaza is critical right now because we know that the Israeli government wants to annex these two parts. And how do you see move on the part of the Egyptian government? And are they connected with Hamas, or they're doing it on them because on the basis of their policy?
I don't know at all if they are in contact with Hamas at the moment, but I did forget to mention something which was very important, and that is that Trump is coming to power. And Trump has already said, as we all know, that he told Netanyahu, or it has been said, that has been said that he has told Netanyahu to end this. So Netanyahu, I think, is, in my opinion, again, I think that the outgoing uh, Biden regime is probably not happy with him and would like to see Netanyahu hurt. And the incoming uh, Trump regime, they want to see this problem off their plate. They don't want to see it, the problem in front of them when they come to power. So that, I think, does put pressure on Netanyahu to accept some sort of ceasefire. I have no idea if that will happen. Hamas, they are continuing to uh, fight against the Israeli regime in Gaza. So is the Islamic Jihad. The Israeli regime constantly attacks the West Bank and kills people there, something that the Western media never talks about. But in the West Bank, Islamic Jihad and Hamas, I think it's fair to, I think that Islamic Jihad has a stronger presence in the West Bank than it does in Gaza. But these groups, as well as other groups, they are all um, they all have they're all powerful. They're very effective and powerful. So the Israelis are tired. They're isolated. They're despised. Uh, and they're also under pressure to end this. I think Biden would like to see Netanyahu. I think, I think his people at least would like to see Netanyahu humiliated, and to a degree, not Israel, but him. And Trump just wants not to have this problem.
And it seems that the conflicts in Ukraine and in the Middle East are connected much more than we have expected to be, because we see the role of Russia and in the Middle East and the way that they're talking about it in Ukraine. But how do you see, even on the Russian part, we had some sort of hope with the Trump administration to make some sort of changes, to make some sort of new political movements toward Russia, maybe closer to Russia. Right now, with the new appointments, with new people coming to the Trump administration, it's every time we hear someone new is coming to the administration, it's getting worse, it's not getting better. And here comes the question, are Iran and Russia getting to the point that they're just giving up on the United States and their policy because they've been betrayed by the United States and their policymakers so
Well,
many
I think
times?
it's yeah, I think it's very fair to say that the Iranians and Russians are skeptical, highly skeptical, to say the least. And I think there is a strong link between what is going on in Ukraine and what is going on in Palestine, in Lebanon, and in West Asia in general. And I think the more the West escalates, the closer the relationship becomes between uh, the Russian government and those forces in West Asia that are opposed to the United States. And the same is true with China as well. I think it causes them to tilt further away from the West and to support non-Western actors because they see the United States as becoming increasingly aggressive, and it's dangerous for them. A weak Iran is not good for China. A weak Russia is not good for China. A weak Russia is not good for Iran, and a weak Iran is not good for Russia. So I think that these are all important elements that are taken into account. There are some reports that, for example, the Russians are giving weapons to Yemen. I don't know if that's really true. but I think that the Russians would probably be helping Iran more. Iran helps Russia more. The Iranian and Russian military uh, cooperation has expanded dramatically over the past few years, and their political cooperation. The Americans, the more therefore that they escalate, and the more the Europeans escalate, the greater the incentive is for the Russians to retaliate. Their retaliation can come in the form of hypersonic missiles, but it can also come in the form of greater cooperation with the Axis of Resistance and the Islamic Republic of Iran, where they could hurt the Americans and their allies in a different way. So, in general, there is it's very the link is very strong, and I think that although you cannot really be 100% sure about what is going to happen in the United States, some say that Trump is appointing uh, these madmen in order to be the bad cop, and then Trump would be the good cop. Uh, it doesn't sound like a reasonable way to do diplomacy, but that is a theory. But I think that the skepticism is enormous, and these people are going to have a very negative influence, and they're going to create mistrust. And so, Russia is not going to, after all the gains that it has made, especially in recent months, they're not going to relinquish those gains and give up the momentum because of Donald Trump. They've made too many sacrifices, and they have expectations. And therefore, the gap that exists between the United States and Russia now or under Trump is going to be enormous. If Trump capitulates, or if Trump gives what the Russians want and demand, then he will be seen as a traitor by his opponents. And his opponents hate him. And even in our region, I imagine that many of those people who are silent over the Holocaust in Gaza and the genocidal attacks in Lebanon because they wanted Biden or Harris to come into power, they would like to hammer Trump with genocide and even though they most of them even though in the Democratic Party the elites fully support the Israeli regime, but the ordinary people, they are very critical of the regime. So I'm sure that many people who were quiet until now, they will start going to the streets and protesting. Life, Trump cannot concede too much in Ukraine without being humiliated at home by his enemies, and they hate him, even though he won big. But I think the hatred for him is probably even greater than in 2016 and 2020, from what I'm seeing. And in our region, also, Trump, if he escalates too much alongside the Israelis, the opposition at home, I think, will become very difficult for him to manage, especially since he said uh, that he is against the wars, and of course he's a serial liar. There's no doubt about that. But it does make it all the more difficult for him because he said, "Look, I want to make America great again," and then he starts off with escalation in Palestine or with Iran or with Russia. I think it's going to hurt him, especially with the U.S. economy doing so poorly and, according to many, heading towards a very major crisis. So the link is very strong. The link is there between the events in Europe and in West Asia that has caused a strengthening of ties between Iran and Russia. And I think the events in Syria are only going to make it stronger. And the foolishness of killing Russian soldiers uh, in the area between Idlib and Aleppo, I think is only going to complicate matters further and push Iran and Russia towards even further cooperation on this particular front as well.
As you know, the Russian army has used a new hypersonic missile called Oreshnik in Ukraine, and which many people that I've talked with, they're believing that it's a game changer in terms of military advancement. Before that, we had Iranian officials, before all of these happening, One of the Iranian officials said that we don't need nuclear bombs. We have something much more powerful. And many people are asking in the West that what does it mean? And what's your interpretation of this statement on the part of Iranian officials?
Well, I don't know any military secrets in this country, but there are a few things that I can say, and it's information that you know as well as I. First of all, uh, we should wait for the Iranian strike on Israel. And I think we'll better understand how powerful Iran's missile capabilities are. And also Iran's defense capabilities, which have shown themselves to be pretty impressive when the Israeli regime tried to strike Iran, but that's another issue. So that's something that we will be seeing soon. But I think the most important thing that in the West that they should consider, or the two things that they should always keep in mind, is A, if there's any attack on Iran's nuclear program, Iran's nuclear posture will change. Or if there's some sort of threat to Iran's existence, Iran's nuclear posture will change. That has been said repeatedly by Dr. Kharazi, who is the leader's foreign policy advisor. And obviously, since he said it repeatedly over the last year and a half, that means he has the authority to say that. It's not something that he said and it was a mistake, or he retracted, or he didn't repeat. Second is that Iran is a nuclear threshold state. Its nuclear program is peaceful. It's always been peaceful. There's no real evidence that Iran, even before, even 2 decades ago, was really pursuing a nuclear weapon. There's no evidence of that. But Iran is a nuclear threshold state, and it's one of the 10 most developed countries in the world when it comes to nuclear technology. Iran's missile technology is clear for everyone to see, and we will see more of it in shortly. So they should put two and two together. I remember I was on Al Jazeera once, very years ago, when Iran said that it's going to um, enrich uranium at 20%. And I was on with a Western nuclear scientist. And he started explaining how it would take months for Iran to do this. And I knowing very little about the most basic elements of physics, only what I read in high school, and I don't remember that either. I said that Iran will enrich uranium at 20% very swiftly because they said they'll do it. Hours later, Iran did it. Hours later. So the West likes to underestimate Iran, and that is a part of this Orientalist, top to bottom worldview that they have, underestimating the, brown people and the other and so on. They should not underestimate Iran's capabilities. And when Iran says that its nuclear program is well protected, Israelis won't be able to destroy it. It is deep underground. I don't think the Americans could destroy it, even if they wanted to. And Iran would definitely quickly leave the NPT and do what it feels it needs to do wherever it will do it. So the West should not push Iran for a nuclear weapon. The West should make sure that Iran does not go in that direction. And the way to do it is to yank on the leash of those who want to push things in the wrong direction. Iran does not want a nuclear weapon. The reason is because it creates instability across the region. If Iran develops a nuclear weapon, then other countries want to develop nuclear weapons. Then you're going to have lots of countries with nuclear weapons, and many of them are run by dictators, family dictatorships. Many of these regimes are unstable. Saudi Arabia is a country which is named after a family. It's a tribal country. A lot of these countries could grow unstable. Look at what happened to Libya. After the Americans destroyed the government, the country fell apart. So imagine in Libya if some rogue elements had obtained a nuclear weapon, let's say, if there were nuclear weapons there at the time. So Iran doesn't want to create this environment in West Asia or Central Asia where countries all have nuclear weapons, because it's a horrible thing. Remember, during the Iran-Iraq War, when the West was giving Saddam Hussein to use, they were giving him chemical weapons. They gave the military intelligence to use it. They gave him the political cover. Iran did not choose to create nuclear weapons, chemical weapons. The leader back then said, no, it's forbidden. These are horrible weapons. I was injured twice with chemical weapons. Once I was injured the first time, I was injured with a nerve agent among friends. We were all injured. And the second, which was more, in my opinion, a more terrifying weapon, it was mustard gas near the end of the war. Many died. Many even now continue to slowly die over many years. They can't breathe, But in any case, the Iranians refused to produce those chemical weapons. And so I understand Iran's position. But if Iran is forced to have nuclear weapons, they will get them very quickly. And they should remember what I was saying about the 20%. They should not underestimate Iran and Iran's capabilities. The second is that if there's a conflict, because Israel is too weak to fight any war with Iran, they will lose. And so its only hope is that the Americans would get involved. If the Americans get involved, they should keep in mind that Iran has hundreds of thousands of missiles and drones underground in countless underground missile and drone bases. And American bases in the Persian Gulf and the region would be destroyed. But far more important than the American bases is the fact that those countries that host them, or those regimes that host them, they will be seen as aggressors. They will be seen as a part of the aggression. Their infrastructure will be destroyed. That would mean no more gas. That would mean no more oil. Even if the Americans carry out a small strike and the Iranians retaliate in a limited way, that would drive up the price of oil and gas, enormously. And if it's a full-blown war, then there will be no more oil and gas coming from this region. And that will destroy the global economy. So there is a balance of terror between Iran and the United States in that regard. So I think the West should rethink their policies. The world has changed. The West is not the power that it was before. It created this situation, especially with its foolish economic policies, from the 1980s and especially the 1990s, the deindustrialization of much of the West, and then the change and laws and the consolidation of wealth and the collapse of the middle class and the endless wars that began after 9/11. And they brought it upon themselves. But the world today is a very different world than in 1991, when the United States came in and created a huge coalition to fight against Saddam Hussein. And there is reason to believe, there is evidence that actually Saddam Hussein in Kuwait did not fire because there was a deal between him and the West where his forces would be expelled from Kuwait and he would not be overthrown. And when their forces were expelled, when there was an uprising in Iraq, the Americans allowed him to use his helicopters to crush the protesters and the people who wanted to overthrow him. So there is reason to believe that there was a deal struck between Saddam Hussein and the West back then. But that aside, this is not 1991. The United States is not that power. And Iran, the axis of, when Yemen, despite the B-52 and B-2 bombers and other bombers striking Yemen, they've shut the gates to the Red Sea. Iran is infinitely more powerful. So the West should rethink its policies. Instead of trying to be the masters of the earth, like they used to be, they should recognize that this 500 years of domination is very, very rapidly coming to an end.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Marandi, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
The successes of the Russian army on the battlefield in Ukraine are haunting the so-called Western leaders. Realizing that the West is losing Ukraine, Washington, together with other NATO countries, is doing everything possible to make sure that Russia pays a heavy price for achieving its goals in the Special Military Operations Zone. Realizing that it would not be possible to cope with the Russian army on the battlefield in Ukraine, the West began to strike at Russia's allies in the Middle East. So, over the past 72 hours, the situation in Syria has sharply escalated. In particular, terrorists from the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, together with pro-Turkish militants from the so-called Free Syrian Army, launched a large-scale offensive on a wide front, in the north of Aleppo province. The main goal of these terrorists is to capture the largest city in Syria, Aleppo. Unfortunately, the experienced Syrian army was unable to stop the well-armed militants. In the last 24 hours alone, the terrorists have managed to advance 15 kilometers. It is reported that as of November 30, 2024, terrorists from the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and pro-Turkish militants from the Free Syrian Army are located just 5 kilometers from the western suburbs of Aleppo. According to the authoritative Telegram channel Middle East Spectator, the terrorists continue their rapid offensive, pushing the Syrian army east of Idlib. In the last 2 days alone, the terrorists have posted dozens of videos online, with captured Syrian soldiers, many of whom were executed live on the air. Moreover, the Syrian army has also lost control of the important M5 highway that runs south of the city of Aleppo. At the same time, it is worth noting that the city of Sarakib, located next to this highway, is an important defense hub for the Syrian army. If the terrorists capture this city, the situation of the Syrian army will deteriorate significantly along the entire combat contact line. Meanwhile, reputable Middle Eastern news sources claim that it is only thanks to Russian combat aviation that terrorists have not yet managed to capture cities such as Aleppo and Sarakib, in northwestern Syria. In particular, it became known that on the night of November 29, the Russian aerospace forces conducted a successful operation to destroy the manpower and commanders of the terrorist group Al-Amshat. My dear truth seekers, let me remind you that Ankara actively supports this terrorist group. The militants of Al-Amshat are actually Turkey's strike force in the northwestern part of Syria. Moreover, Middle Eastern sources also confirmed the information that active duty officers of the Turkish and Ukrainian armies lead many units of these terrorist groups, advancing on Aleppo and Sarakib. In particular, Turkish and Ukrainian officers command many units of such pro-Turkish and pro-American terrorist groups as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, Al-Amshat, Faylaq al-Sham, and Liwa Asafat al-Shamal. It is reported that in the last 48 hours alone, Russian combat aviation managed to destroy about 10 Turkish and Ukrainian officers in the northwestern part of Syria. Thus, it becomes clear that Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has once again betrayed Vladimir Putin, who saved the life of this two-headed snake in 2016. It is obvious that the Turkish president could not launch this military operation without Washington's approval. The fact that Ukrainian officers along with their colleagues from Turkey command many units of these terrorist groups indicates that the offensive operation in northwestern Syria was planned and organized by the United States, NATO, Turkey, and Ukraine. Moreover, they chose the perfect moment to attack. The fact is that Iran is in confrontation with Israel and cannot support the Syrian army at the same level. Lebanese Hezbollah is also unable to provide support to Syria, as units of this movement suffered significant losses in the war against Tel Aviv. Moscow also cannot afford to send its experienced generals and equipment to Syria, as Vladimir Putin's top priority right now is a special military operation in Ukraine. Moreover, the Syrian army has also lost strong support on the ground from experienced fighters from the PMC Wagner group. The fact is that at the moment, all the fighters of this legendary private military company are in Ukraine and the hottest spots of Africa. Against this backdrop, it becomes clear why Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan decided to join Moscow's enemies and stab Russia in the back at this very moment. In addition, a few days before the resumption of hostilities in Syria, Turkish leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan refused Vladimir Putin's mediation efforts and did not enter into a dialogue with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Well, I am absolutely sure that many of you were not surprised by such a despicable act by Erdogan, and that many of you expected such betrayal from Turkey. On the contrary, it would be strange if Erdogan did not take advantage of this situation and refuse to unite with Russia's enemies. However, in the current situation, Russia is more concerned about the intentions of the United States than Turkey's actions in Syria. The fact is that the events in Syria are a continuation of Washington's policy of weakening Moscow's position in the upcoming negotiations. By allowing Kiev to fire Western long-range missiles deep into Russian territory and launching a new full-scale offensive in Syria, the United States is trying to weaken Russia's position as much as possible in the upcoming negotiations on Ukraine, and force Moscow to conclude peace in Washington's terms. In particular, the United States wants Moscow to freeze the conflict along the current front line, leaving all conquered cities and towns under the Russian army's control. The fact is that Washington understands perfectly well that if the Russian army does not stop, then over the next year, all the central regions of Ukraine and even the western part of this country may come under Moscow's control. Thus, as you can see, before the upcoming negotiations, the United States, with the help of its proxies, is attacking Russia from all sides and even in the Middle East, trying to put Vladimir Putin in the most unfavorable position. Amid all this, I would advise Vladimir Putin not to make even the most insignificant concessions to Russia's enemies. Russia should concentrate as much as possible and complete what has been started. Only the unconditional surrender of the Kiev regime and the complete demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine can be considered a victory for Russia in the current conflict. Vladimir Putin must win a convincing victory in Ukraine, and only then punish the Turkish president in Syria. I believe that after the victory in Ukraine, Vladimir Putin should severely punish Recep Erdogan, so that he finally understands that his habit of betraying Russia will not end well for him.
Storm Shadow scout missile strikes into Russian territory, that Russia would strike back immediately, that they would warn the West where they were going to hit. They would give them some time to evacuate personnel, but that, and Putin smiled when he said this, you won't be able to stop it. There's nothing you can do to prevent it. Today at the United Nations, Ambassador Polyansky, the deputy to Nebenzia, he spoke and he said basically to the West, he says, we warned you, you've asked for it, and you're going to get it. I mean, it was that clear, that direct. So the result of the last 2 days of attack of missile strikes into Russia, into Kursk region, Russia last night issued a NOTAM, which is a notice to airmen warning closing off the airspace around the military base where the Oreshnik missile was launched last Thursday that destroyed the Yuzmash plant in Dnipropetrovsk. And, Russia's going to do it again. They've issued that warning for until the 30th, so until Saturday. We've got maybe a couple of days. By Saturday, we will know what had happened. But Russia's very clear. They're going to strike back. They're going to hit a military target, most likely in Ukraine. It may be a joint NATO Ukrainian military target, but they're going to hit it.
Why does Ray, why does the West not take Putin seriously?
Judge, that's a really tough question. Russia is just a gas station posing as a country. They use dishwater ports and stuff like that to build their ICBMs. Russia has been so marginalized and denigrated by the Western media that I think that privileged people like Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan tend to believe their own propaganda. And this drives Putin crazy. Let me inject one note of danger here. We have all been saying that, as Larry, Scott, myself, and others, that this is the most dangerous situation having to do the possible nuclear exchange since Cuba. Okay, why do we say that? Well, Lukyanov, the research director for Valdai, he said today in something published by the Russians, he said this, look, the absence of a secure back channel communication mode is what's different, okay? Yeah. Both sides now face greater pressures to act, both sides, okay? Got that? This increases the danger of an accidental escalation as leaders may feel compelled to carry out their threats in order to maintain their credibility. The breakdown of private diplomacy and the rise of public threats have made the nuclear balance more precarious than ever. If the current trajectory continues, the risk of escalation will only grow, and the stability that once existed during the Cold War may seem like a distant memory. This is big. I thought there was a channel like that between the Secretary Austin and Belousov, his counterpart in Moscow. Apparently, either the U.S. has unplugged the end of our end of the communication, or they've told Austin, no, don't talk to Belousov anymore. In other words, Lukyanov, who is well informed about as high as you can go in that kind of official, is saying, look, that's the difference. That's what makes it really perilous. And both sides, like the Russians as well as the U.S., might be tempted to go ahead and do something really stupid just to maintain their credibility.
Here's the reference that Larry made to Putin smiling. Cut number 1.
The Oreshnik missile system isn't simply an efficient hypersonic weapon system. Thanks to its power, particularly in the case of its massive use in combination with other precision long-range weapons that Russia has, the results of its use against enemy targets would be comparable in effect, and its power to strategic weapons. Although, in fact, the Oreshnik system is not a strategic weapon. In any case, it is not an intercontinental ballistic missile. No one in the world has such weapons yet, as we know, as you know. Sooner or later, other leading countries will also get them. We are aware that they are already under development. But this will not happen tomorrow, or in a year, or even 2 years. While we have this system now, I will add that there are no means of counteracting such a missile. No means of intercepting it. In the world today, they don't exist. And I will emphasize once again, we will continue testing the latest system. Considering the special strength of this weapon, its power, it will be put into service in the strategic missile forces. In addition to the Oreshnik system, several similar systems are currently being developed in Russia for further testing. Based on the results of the testing, this weapon will also go into serial production. That is, we are developing a whole line of medium and shorter range systems.
The new missile could be fitted with nuclear and conventional warheads. It can reach targets across the entirety of Europe.
Why doesn't the West take that seriously, Larry Johnson?
We have what's called confirmation bias. We have decided that we know best, that our understanding is superior, and that we've indulged this nonsense that Russia is using computer chips from washing machines and refrigerators. Our refusal to take Russia, to take Putin at face value. He is not your typical Western BS artist who will say and do anything. He's not Joe Biden. He absolutely is parsimonious with his words, and he always says what he means and means what he says. And I likened that moment the other day when I on my blog to the iconic scene from the movie Billy Jack, where Billy Jack kicks the bad guy on the side, tells him, "Hey, I'm going to take this right foot and I'm going to put it on that side of your face. I'm going to whomp you upside the face, and there's nothing you can do about it." That's exactly what he said. And the nice thing about this is it gives Russia a way to respond without having to go nuclear. But as Putin correctly noted, this has the characteristics of a strategic weapon. When he says strategic, he means nuclear. So it's sort of like a nuclear weapon, but it comes without the radiation and without the blast effect. However, they can add that to it if they want to. It is a most formidable weapon system. And as he correctly stated, the West has no answer.
Bad news.
So we're going to see another demonstration here. And when it happens, maybe the West will finally pay attention, much like the Japanese did after the bombing of Nagasaki.
Ray, does American intel know what is coming next, when it's coming, and where it's going?
Generally speaking, the answer is yes. And Putin himself, in talking with Western journalists in 2016, talked about, we know when the next missile that fits into those canisters or those capsules in Romania or Poland, we know when they'll reach 1,000 kilometers range. And on these and they know what we know. They know that we know that they know. All right. So it's come to a pass where the word checkmate, the word game changer. Now in the Bronx, I never was smart enough to learn how to play chess with the Jewish kids in my neighborhood. Okay, but I did play checkers. I was lousy at checkers, but I know what checkmate means. Okay, in our poker circle, it meant when to hold them and when to fold them. Okay, well, it's time to fold them. Okay, the problem is that Blinken and Sullivan, they think about this. Okay, it's time to fold them. And to use the checkmate analogy again, there's a socially acceptable way to lose. Okay, you resign. Okay, you say, okay, the game's over. I'm going to leave. That's when you're checkmated. There's no indication that even though Sullivan and Blinken know chess, no doubt, there's no indication they know when to fold them. So that's what's perilous about this. Okay. Bottom line, just to inject a note of caution here, I think Putin, well aware of all this, is incredibly sang-froid-full. Okay, he's not going to be provoked in the next days before January 20th. I think it will not rise to the bait when he has these weapons and when he has the initiative and is all just about to conquer the rest of Ukraine. So I think that's going for us here. He's not going to try to do something really stupid unless he's really provoked. And that provocation could be if the Ukrainians use these missiles on something like the Kursk nuclear power station, which would yield results worse, 10 times worse than Chernobyl. They could do that.
Here's Secretary Austin last week. Doesn't seem to be concerned about this at all. Cut number 15.
We've known for several weeks that they were revamping their policy on use of nuclear weapons. I don't see an indication that there's an imminent intent to use nuclear weapons.
Is he bluffing with this change?
He has rattled his nuclear saber quite a bit.
Larry, that is hardly worthy of the Secretary of Defense of the United States.
Yeah, he's ignoring the fact that the United States has initiated this provocation. We sent those attack of missiles 6 months ago, 7 months ago. So it's not like they were just recently sent. And all of this is, Judge, this is part of a broader, let's call it deep state operation to create chaos for the Trump administration coming in. It's all tied to the North Korean troops that don't exist. Yeah, but remember, it was David Sanger that put the CIA story out first, that they're all these North Korean troops. And why are the North Korean troops there? Because the Russians are suffering such catastrophic losses that they need the North Koreans just to hang on so they don't lose. I mean, it was all a lie, but they're using that lie to justify, well, that's why we had to tell Ukraine that they could use ATACMS, because the Russians have brought in now, it started off at 3,000. Now it's like 20,000 North Koreans to fight against us. And so the lie keeps growing like a big fishtail. And this is part of a broader plan, not just confined to Ukraine. I mean, there are aspects of this plan that extend over to Israel. Notice in Syria today, these radical Islamic, Sunni Islamic extremists launched an offensive against Russian and Syrian troops. I guarantee you there's U.S. money behind that as well. So what we're seeing is a broader effort to create a grand destabilization, if they can, because they recognize Trump presents an existential threat to them if he takes office.
Here's Mike Waltz sounding like Mike Pompeo, Larry and Ray, defending the use of anti-personnel landmines because it might stop the Russians from advancing. Cut number 17.
Well, these mines are the type that you can turn on, turn off. They're smart mines, but at the same time, it is a step towards somewhat solidifying the lines. And we also needed to stop Russian gains.
I mean, is this the language of a representative of a president who's going to bring about an end to the war, or who's taking sides in the war and it's against Russia, Larry?
Oh, no, he's taking sides very clearly. And remember, this is Mr. Glove in hand or hand in glove with Jake Sullivan. That's not what people who voted for Trump voted for. They don't want hand in glove. They want their damn hand out of that glove. They want to throw that glove away. It's dirty. They don't want that to fit. No, they want a different approach. And Waltz is betraying the Trump voters, and in the course of this, he's endangering America.
Here's one for you, Ray McGovern, the former director of the CIA and former Secretary of State, saying, if we keep up using the ATACMS, the whole conflict will fundamentally change in 60 days. Cut number 13.
I think that the missile attack at a real scale last night into Ukraine is evidence that Vladimir Putin knows that this is his maximum point of leverage, and that in 60 days, fundamentally, his leverage will have decreased, and the shaping of that conflict will have fundamentally changed as well.
What is he driving at, Ray?
That was Mike Pompeo, right?
Yes, it was a slimmed down Mike Pompeo, but
Yeah.
radically slimmed down, but that's Mike, yes.
Yeah, well, he graduated first in his class from West Point, which kind of proves that you can get all straight A's and flunk life. I mean, he hadn't said a sensible thing in a decade or so. I don't know why these people keep drumming on this. They must know better, and yet it's the party line, literally, and they got to keep doing it, and they keep asserting these things that are factually non-existent. This is not going to help Trump. The business here with Mike Waltz and so forth, it really depends on whether they're loyal to Trump and how much weight he's going to throw behind his own policies. Okay, now the ones he picked the first time around, they were incompetent and they were dangerous because they were disloyal. This time they're incompetent, they're not very knowledgeable, but they're loyal. Okay, so what does that give us? That gives us a situation where Trump, if he decides to assert his authority, it can make it stick. And the question is, will Trump be smart enough to realize that he's got to fold the cards on Ukraine, and he's got a very weak hand, but he should play it so that the game doesn't go down the drain completely.
Tell me if this is what Donald Trump believes. Cut number 10.
I'll give one tip away that the president has mentioned. He will say to that murderous former KGB colonel, that thug who runs the Russian Federation, you will negotiate now, or the aid that we have given to Ukraine thus far will look like peanuts. That's how he will force those gentlemen to come to an arrangement that stops the bloodshed.
Thought the neocons were gone, Larry Johnson.
I mean, look, what Gorka said there is so abjectly stupid. You don't even know where to begin. For starters, the Biden administration has given the Ukrainians close to $200 billion in weapons and aid.
They want to give them a tree.
It's not like they've been parsimonious, just saying, oh, here's a quarter, go help yourself to some candy kid. We have opened the treasury to them. They've gotten every single weapon system they wanted. Like I said, they've had the ATACMS now for 6 months. They don't have the trained personnel. They've had F-16s for at least 5 months. They haven't been able to use those effectively. And the notion that that there's a whole warehouse stocked with all this equipment that we just haven't sent to Ukraine, nonsense. It's ridiculous. So, there's Gorka displaying a level of ignorance that is breathtaking, not even understanding what the situation is on the ground. And that was also sort of the premise of Pompeo's comments that, the Bidens have been holding back. People pretend like the Biden administration has been holding back on Ukraine and holding back on Israel. And if we just get Donald Trump in there, the dogs will be free and American military power can go to work. It is a fantasy. It's a delusion. And if they follow through on it, it's going to get us killed.
Here's more Gorka, as if that's not enough. He wants to revisit what we did in Iraq. Cut number 12.
The resurgence of global jihadism. People think that it went away, but it didn't. With the surrender of Afghanistan, the disgraceful surrender of Afghanistan by Joe Biden, by Lloyd Austin, his Secretary of Defense, we have a new hub of jihadism. We left just $83 billion worth of weapons for the Taliban. Al-Qaeda is resurgent. ISIS is still out there. Whether it's the Houthis or whether it's the numerous proxies of Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas, the threat is as great as it's ever been. And
is Al-Qaeda and the Taliban a threat to the United States? Where does he come with this? It was the Mike Pompeo who negotiated for Trump with the Taliban that freed 5,000 Taliban prisoners, fighters from jail. Yeah, the freeing occurred on Biden's watch, but the deal was signed by Trump. Ray?
Well, Judge, one has to be really not only an expert at textual analysis, but visual analysis. Now, I don't know if any of you too noticed that Gorka is channeling Bolton. You see that little plug in his ear there? And it's the same little plug. That's a direct channel to Bolton. And he's trying to send things back. Look, it's really going to be interesting how this plays out. We have Tulsi Gabbard. as long as she gets confirmed, okay, as long as she's in place, she reports to the president every morning or through her emissaries, the PDB briefer, President's Daily Briefer, which I used to be, in person 6 days a week. Now, will Mike Waltz be there? Yeah. Will Gorka be there? No. Okay. Will Bolton be there? No. So, to the degree that Tulsi Gabbard is given her head, and to the degree that she remains somewhat sane, unlike the rest of them, she's going to embarrass the likes of Mike Waltz and talk some sense into Trump. And
Right.
it could be that would attenuate his instincts and make him realize what this Gorka fella is. He's a really strange cat. The only benefit he has is his wonderful voice. I'm going to practice to see if I can get better.
Right, right. Switching over to Israel, how legitimate, Larry, is the ICC indictment of Benjamin Netanyahu and the indictment of Yoav Gallant?
No, it's a solid indictment, unlike the indictment of Vladimir Putin, because Putin was not Russia is not a signatory to the Rome Treaty, and neither was Ukraine. So there's really no jurisdiction. At least in this, the Palestinians are signatories, so they did have jurisdiction from that standpoint. And the indictment itself is very, very specific and lays it out. Look, even by Benjamin Netanyahu's own words that were recorded when he was interviewed by William Buckley back in 1986, where he defined terrorism by his own words. Israel is committing terrorism against the Palestinian people. It is the deliberate use of violence against civilians for political purposes. That is exactly what's taken place in Gaza. That's what's taking place in the West Bank, and that's what's taking place in the neighborhoods in Beirut, Lebanon.
Do you think he was forced into the Hezbollah ceasefire because the IDF is taking a beating in Lebanon, and he doesn't want the public to know that?
Is that for me?
Sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is they declared victory and going home. They said, "Oh man, we beat Hezbollah." Well, they haven't beat Hezbollah. And when you go back and read the Israeli, or try to read the Israeli press on this, and I'm talking about Haaretz, Times of Israel, Jerusalem Post, and Ynet News, over the last 2 months, it's been like Helen Keller was their universal reporter, saying nothing, seeing nothing, hearing nothing about the casualties that the Israeli troops are taking. Once in a while, you might get a report. Meanwhile, when you read the Hezbollah press, the level of attacks, the level of rocket intensity into northern Israel was increasing, not decreasing. And so the Israelis had to find a way out. So they've now got this ceasefire. They claim that the Lebanese military is going to keep Hezbollah under control. Not going to happen. But it gives them an excuse to pull out and pretend that, oh boy, man, we beat Hezbollah. We defeated them. And I know I'm in touch with some of these crazy Zionists. That's exactly what they're saying. Oh man, we defeated Hezbollah. They're delusional, but it seems to be a common disease running around Washington, D.C. and Tel Aviv these days.
Ray, does the American intelligence community know the nature and extent of the battle losses in southern Lebanon? Do Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken and Joe Biden know whether Netanyahu was beaten so badly that he had to get the heck out of there? Do they know the nature and extent of his domestic political instability over the release of secret documents intended to make him look good, and the resurgence of his criminal prosecutions?
Judge, in answer to your question, what does Biden know? I don't know what Biden knows. Biden probably doesn't know what he knows or what he doesn't know. Do Blinken and Sullivan know? Sure they do. Okay. Now, are Blinken and Sullivan sociopaths? I mean, I just learned that word recently. That fits people who allow genocide. Okay. What does that mean? Well, they know, but they won't stop it, okay? And they don't know when to fold their cards, okay? Now, Netanyahu is in deep kimchi. I mean, he's taken on the Shin Bet, he's taken on the army. I don't know how long he's going to last, but as Larry said, he can't really claim with any legitimacy a big victory in southern Lebanon. So, what's going to happen? Well, nothing's going to happen until Trump comes in, and then nothing going to happen again. So we have to get our rear ends out of our couches and make sure that we Americans don't abide people who abide by or enable or arm other countries that are involved in genocide.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you for coming on during this holiday weekend. I hope you get
While the representatives of the Kiev regime, led by Vladimir Zelensky, have not left their underground bunkers for the third day in a row, in anticipation of a crushing blow to the capital of Ukraine, the Russian aerospace forces, together with missile forces, continue to launch massive missile strikes against military objects and energy infrastructure facilities of Ukraine, located throughout the territory of this Eastern European country. So, in the last 24 hours alone, Russia has rained down on Ukraine more than 100 rockets of various types, ranging from ballistic to cruise missiles. It is reported that in the last 3 days alone, as a result of these massive missile strikes, Russia has managed to destroy dozens of military and energy facilities in the central, southern, northern, and western parts of Ukraine. Dozens of NATO facilities located in both the western and central parts of Ukraine were also hit by Russian missiles. By the way, today was also no exception. On November 28, independent monitoring services recorded about 40 explosions in Ukraine's cities of Lutsk, Rivne, Vinnytsia, Kiev, Odessa, Dnipro, and Lviv. It is reported that as a result of this missile attack, dozens of electrical substations in western Ukraine were destroyed, as well as about 10 classified NATO facilities, where American ATACMS ballistic missiles and Franco-British Storm Shadow cruise missiles were stored. Against this backdrop, it is worth paying attention to a very suspicious official statement by the Department of National Defense and the Canadian Armed Forces. In particular, after these massive Russian missile strikes on Ukraine, on November 28, 2024, the Canadian Defense Ministry officially announced the death of a Canadian Army officer, Lieutenant Colonel Kent Miller. In an official statement from the Canadian Defense Ministry, it was said that this officer allegedly died in the Belgian town of Casto, due to health complications. At the same time, insiders noticed that the Canadian authorities handed over to relatives the body of the deceased officer in a sealed coffin. Thus, as you can see, the number of losses of NATO forces in Ukraine continues to grow rapidly. According to independent monitoring services, NATO military transport planes are transporting out of Ukraine dozens of coffins with soldiers and officers of Western countries almost every day. Meanwhile, first deputy permanent representative of Russia to the UN, Dmitry Polyansky, at a meeting of the Security Council dedicated to the Ukrainian crisis, officially stated that Moscow has every right to a mirror response to attacks by Western long-range missiles on the territory of the Russian Federation. In particular, the senior Russian diplomat bluntly stated that Russia has every right to attack military facilities on the territory of those Western countries that allowed Kiev to fire their long-range missiles deep into Russian territory. I officially declare that Moscow has every right to use its weapons against those countries that allowed Kiev to fire its missiles against Russia. We have repeatedly warned you about the deplorable consequences of this decision. However, you have made your choice. And now, the wait for Russia's response isn't too long. You will soon receive a decisive and mirrored response, senior Russian diplomat Dmitry Polyansky said. Thus, Russia has officially confirmed that NATO facilities, located not only on the territory of Ukraine, but also on the territory of Britain, France, and even the United States, can be hit by Russian missiles. Moreover, the Russian diplomat also mentioned the head of the Kiev regime, Vladimir Zelensky. In particular, he said that at the moment, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation is preparing a crushing retaliatory strike to Zelensky's order to attack the Kursk region with the help of American ATACMS missiles. Surprisingly, immediately after this statement by a senior Russian diplomat, the chairman of the Turkish Nationalist Movement Party, Devlet Bahçeli, called on U.S. citizens and the U.S. military to get rid of Biden and his administration, before it was too late. This Turkish politician noted that Biden and his administration are doing everything to start World War III, with the use of nuclear missiles. At the moment, the main goal of Biden and his administration is to start a global war before the inauguration of the elected head of state, Donald Trump. I urge sane American politicians and U.S. citizens not to wait for January 20th, 2025, and to impeach this madman. By doing this, you would do a great service to the whole world, and save all mankind from imminent death, Turkish politician Devlet Bahçeli said. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin, at a meeting of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, made a rather alarming statement that shocked the Kiev authorities. In particular, he said that the General Staff, together with the Russian Ministry of Defense, are selecting targets for their further destruction on the territory of Ukraine, using the world's most powerful hypersonic ballistic missile Orshnik. At the same time, the Russian leader noted that these targets could be military facilities, weapons factories, and even decision-making centers, located in Kiev. According to Vladimir Putin, Orshnik can strike at any minute, and he does not hide the future targets of the latest Russian rocket because this hypersonic ballistic missile cannot be shot down with the help of even the most modern types of air defense systems. Moreover, Vladimir Putin even revealed some of the characteristics of this latest Russian missile. According to him, the latest missile Orshnik is capable of delivering nuclear charges with a total capacity of 900 kilotons, to a range of 5,500 kilometers in just a few minutes. At the same time, this missile flies to its target at a mind-boggling speed of 12,400 kilometers per hour. Vladimir Putin noted that it is precisely thanks to this hypersonic speed that this missile is capable of turning any military facilities into dust, even without a nuclear charge. Moreover, the Russian leader also stressed that even underground bunkers are not able to save the people there from this latest Russian missile, clearly hinting that it is time for Vladimir Zelensky to flee from his underground bunker and look for another place to spend the night. Immediately after this statement by Vladimir Putin, insiders in Kyiv said that a real panic was set in the Ukrainian capital. It is reported that at the moment, a large number of people are leaving not only the center of Kyiv, but even its suburbs. Thus, as we can see, Vladimir Putin kept his word and warned the citizens of Ukraine in advance about a new strike by the world's most powerful hypersonic ballistic missile Orshnik.
It's already started on Twitter. The black gender war. It's already happened before. The Democrats has already separated the black family, coming in, offering welfare services, telling black women if the man won't in the house, they could get a check back in the early 40s when the welfare system first started. Yes, they literally went around telling black women they would give them a $16 a month check if they didn't have a black man in the house. Now we have black women on all over social media saying that they can't count on black men to vote for Kamala Harris, that black men are going to be sellouts, that black men don't care about the race. No, we don't care about symbolic victories and token first. We want a plan like the platinum plan that Donald Trump and Ice Cube worked and hashed out. Black women, we are not going to side with you. You've already abandoned the black man by running out on our family for welfare. You sided with the LGBT community. You sided with feminism. We are not going to side with you guys. We are not going to let you guilt us into you celebrating a Chucks and Pearls symbolic victory. We need to sit down and discuss this together. Ask black men why they are leaving the Democratic Party. Ask black men why they're considering voting Trump. Don't just shame us. Don't just try to guilt us. Don't call us brokies because we don't want to vote for Kamala Harris. Not saying we won't vote for her. We just want to know what she's going to do.
And since they lost, they still haven't learned their lesson, the Democrats, that is. You see, it's been the rhetoric centered around not only black men, but Latino men that is creating this divide in America. It is starting to widen it even more. You see, the left, they try to come up with the excuses. Oh, Kamala lost because men are misogynistic or, you know, racist because they don't want to see a black woman, and men, black men, Latino men turn their backs on their women and all that, but that is simply not the case. We just said we want somebody and need somebody that's qualified. Now, I do have segments on here where we're going to hear from the Latino community, but the focal point of this is this delusional Hollywood actress who berates us black men who voted for Trump, saying black men, we hate ourselves in America, effed up by not voting for Kamala, who is smart and powerful. Let's analyze it painfully together.
Let me ask you this. What about what they've said in terms of black, particularly black men and Latinos, supported him more than they have in the past? Why do you think that is? And what do you have to say to black men and Latinos who were not in favor of supporting Kamala Harris?
Oh, honey. Oh, honey. When your favorite niece and your 13-year-old daughter is raped by your alcoholic brother or the next door neighbor, and she tries to abort that baby inside of her from a rape, you're going to regret that.
Actually, see, this is why the education system is failing America. Trump clearly stated two things. One, he does not want to put a national ban on abortion. He wants to leave it up to the states. Two, he also mentioned that the exception, regardless, would be, things like rape and, incest or, just inappropriate intercourse, non-consensual intercourse, and it results in that. And this is what I mean. Like, my people, they're trying to do all this fear mongering to us. See, oh my baby, when you're 13-year-old, and it's like, why would you want to even push that narrative? Like, this happening and it's dramatic and it's not okay, and the people who do this definitely need to be handled. But come on, why would you even wish this on our community?
They want to keep women in their place. It's so disgusting. I can't even put words to them voting for her. They didn't vote for her, didn't vote because she was a woman.
No, I'm a man, and I can tell you that I did not vote for her just on the basis of her being a woman. That would be inappropriate. It's almost like me just voting for her because she's black, like y'all tried to tell me to do, right?
They didn't care that she was smart and powerful, educated, beautiful, kind, joyful, fearless. She would have taken care of this country. She would have protected the people. She would have surrounded herself with great minds. But keeping women in their place was more important to them.
Please, black women, don't believe this. In no way, shape, or form do I possess the capability of trying to keep you in your place. I think society and life has a way of making sure that it keeps us in our place. So, no, I don't think of myself that highly.
And black men, that was just shocking because, honey, he's going to give the military and the police permission to shoot you in your back, and there will be no immunity.
That is a blatant lie. Like, there's nothing to even debunk there. Just fear mongering.
So, baby, y'all done f***ed up. You took every right from your children. Once again, there will be no social security and pensions and rights. This thing has said you will never have to vote again. He's going to be in charge of the military. We have end of story.
You don't think it was a simple situation of looking at the economy, looking at inflation, looking at crime and saying, excuse me, providing and protect. And as men, that's what we want. And as a result of that, I mean, I voted for her. I wasn't voting for him. But speaking to men who felt differently, they didn't think about Roe v. Wade. They didn't think about stuff. They thought about the economy, money in their pockets, and safety in the streets.
Well, listen,
it couldn't have been as simple as that.
First of all, do you see women breaking in people's houses? Do you see women shooting each other in the streets?
Yeah, actually, I do.
They voted because they voted for Trump because, well, I hate saying his name. They voted for him because they hate themselves.
What? Oh my God, you really believe that I hate myself? Wow. Oh my God, like this is the level of delusion here. Like, and Stephen A. Smith, man, he lying. He voted for Trump. I don't care what nobody say. He's way smarter than that. He sees what's going on here. Come on, dog. Like the fear mongering here is next level, and it's beyond dramatic.
And they see this thing as powerful, that he's gonna move mountains for them and make them rich. And unfortunately,
I'm not looking for him to make me rich. I'm just looking for him to make sure these sick people aren't around my kids, and that we don't have immigrants out here putting our lives in danger and our jobs in danger, and actually giving our community a chance to thrive. Like, what are you talking about?
Man, they want a man. They were saying, I'm voting for the man. Well, we're going to see about that. And don't think we're all not at fault. All of us. We went to our jobs, we came home and sat on the sofa and watched movies of destruction. Superman, Batman, the end of this, Armageddon. Well, all of that social consciousness has brought us here. So now, like I said, Lex Luthor is finally in the fucking White House What are you gonna do about it?
I'm just so disappointed, man. I'm just realizing that with age, wisdom doesn't automatically follow. It's so disappointing. It really is. Somebody says, right. The women that was so incompetent, it says the women that was so incompetent, she failed in answering questions to the point that even the far lefties on CNN ripped on her about this. And they meant to say woman, but who am I to correct them? Somebody else said, I'm more disturbed Stephen A voted for her. He gives here a list of good reasons black men may voted for her, then announces he voted for her. Yeah, I mean, voted for Trump. I'm sorry. I'm reading this all discombobulated. Pretty much he was saying that Stephen A. Smith brought up many reasons why we as black men decided to vote for Trump. And then he, says some BS like, come on, dog, these are very practical and simple things, but they keep trying to make it into something that's about feeling. You get it? Like I keep telling y'all, the left is always about something to do with feelings. Always. It's always, oh my God, these people, they feel like this about them. Us. They feel like, black men are misogynistic. They don't want, they're uncomfortable with a woman who's powerful. Like always telling us how we feel. And really it's just like, look, dog, it's about our money. And no, it's not because we all trying to get rich, you know what I mean? I don't know nobody out here who wouldn't mind it. But, you trying to make it seem like Donald Trump is just our golden ticket to get rich or to have some sort of fight wealth in this country. And that's not necessarily false or true. That's not the main reason. Obviously, we care about our dollars in our pockets, being able to maintain jobs and things of that nature. You know what I mean? Of course, we care about being able to feed our children and also be able to provide them opportunities, via financial support from us. Like, come on. I don't need this woman. Let's read some more comments. She and the Democrats should keep going with this message. It will continue to help Republicans win. A side note, she needs a better wig. Let me guess. She ain't got no man. I don't know. I'm reading the comments. I wonder how many damn parties she went to because shake my head. Ain't no way she believes that. Oh, yeah, that'll really make them listen is all what they keep saying. Now, you ask me, it is rhetoric like this that makes the world feel the way they feel. And my Latino men, I ain't forgot about y'all, but the mainstream media is responsible for this type of mindset. You don't believe me?
And finally, we talk a lot about these different demographics and these assumptions of where they're going to go. Latinos in Texas, a district that's 97% Latino, went 75 percentage points for Donald Trump. Why?
Misogyny.
It's on the border. The border crisis is on their doorstep. And they were begging people to care about it for years. We need to take some lessons.
That's what that was.
The lessons are not.
Knock, knock. Who's there? Oh my gosh, it's Whoopi.
You got people. My dad actually watches this show. Oh, yes. Oh man, I got some work to do, y'all. But anyhow, yeah, they blaming it on misogyny and sexism, and they're blaming Kamala's defeat on that. Come on, denial, and then they spew this to the low vibrationals, and I only say that because these are the people who don't care to do any research. You know what I mean? They just hit a soundbite, and they hear that, and it's like, oh yeah, whoa, and don't it sound a lot like what we just heard right there? Come on, y'all, you need more? Okay, MSNBCs. I can't wait till it's MXNBC or MSNBX when Elon purchased. He need to go and do that. I know he's joking around, but come on, dog. Joe Scarborough said that Kamala lost to Donald Trump because blacks and Latinos are sexist and Latinos are racist. I'm serious. It's the rhetoric.
And I just say really quickly, too, Democrats need to be mature. And they need to be honest. And they need to say, yes, there's misogyny. But it's not just misogyny from white men. Mm-hmm. It's misogyny from Hispanic men.
Right.
It's misogyny from black men. Things we've all been talking about, who do not want a woman leading them. Might be race issues with Hispanics. They don't want a black woman as president of the United States. The Democratic Party, I've always found when you're sitting around talking, they love to just sort of balkanize everybody into these separate groups and say, oh, white people don't like women and black people. No, it is time for the Democrats to say, okay, and you and I have talked about this before. a lot of Hispanic voters have problems with black candidates.
Right.
A lot
and
of
with other Hispanics. You got some that don't like each other. And some of the most misogynist things I've heard going on this Get Out the Vote tour came from black men. I mean, misogynist things. So you're absolutely right. It's not simplistic. And we've got to have real honest conversations about it.
Real honest conversations.
These people. I'm serious, man. These talking about Democrats need to be honest. Then he proceeds to, demean multiple races for not agreeing with, his faction of white people, so to speak, man. This left-wing media needs to stop the division and categorization of American people. All they do is talk about identity politics, talk about what they hear as opposed to provide actual context and sources, and then call us everything under the sun for asking for context and sources. We need to reject this rhetoric from this day forward and make them one thing of the past, man. It's
I just have to remind you, don't you ever let anybody take your power from you. You have the same power that you did before November 5th. And you have the same purpose that you did. And you have the same ability to engage and inspire. So don't ever let anybody or any circumstance take your power from you.
No, guys, this is sad. I just came across this while I was scrolling through Twitter. It is about 3:00 in the morning right now for me, but I just had to bring this to you. We all know about the rumors of Kamala Harris being an alcoholic. I mean, she has consistently looked drunk throughout her entire campaign season. And, right after the election, she decided to go on vacation. And it looks like she's been hitting the sauce pretty hard. Now, the DNC decided to put out this video, and I think they thought they can get away with it. But now that she's lost and we know about all of this mismanagement of her campaign, the $1 billion that has gone up in smoke, the 20 million in debt, how they're all turning and blaming each other. We know all of that has gone on, and I think they're just tired. I think Kamala just doesn't give a damn anymore. And this is a clear indication of it. I mean, she's gone full throttle on the bottle. And not that I wish anyone to be an alcoholic, but it is what it is. I mean, she is our vice president. So this is not the time for, kumbaya and holding hands and let's get her sober. No, she's a drunkard. And we have Biden, who is, sundowning and The Walking Dead. I don't even know if the person that they present is actually Biden. Do we know? Is that Biden? I mean, one day he's 6'5", the next day he's like, 5'10". His face is different. It's like he has these face changing masks. America has become the laughing stock of the world. And it's because we have leaders like this. So take a look at Kamala and just get your popcorn ready.
And I am thankful because I know your character is such that you're not going to get knocked down. And you're in this fight. And you're in it for all the right reasons. And I know that about you. It's why you're part of this call right now and all the work that you did over those 107 days and even before. That's your nature. And the outcome of this election, obviously, is not what we wanted. It is not what we worked so hard for. But I am proud of the race we ran. And your role in this was critical. What we did in 107 days was unprecedented. Think about the coalition that we built. And we were so intentional about that. You would hear me talk about it all the time. Being a daughter of parents who are active in the civil rights movement, I know and believe that the best movements that are about progress in our country mean that it's leaders that you that we are dedicated to the coalition, to bringing people together that seemingly have nothing in common, but have everything in common. A coalition where we bring people together based on a deep love of our country and our understanding that the strength of our country will be a function of our willingness to put in the work, and that we will do that work with a sense of joy, yes, with a sense of work ethic and understanding it's going to be hard, but it's good work. It's good work to be engaged in a collective fight for America's future. And it means so much to me and to Governor Walz that you knocked on doors, you called friends, you called in favors. You said, hey, you know, I showed up at your softball game. Now I need you to show up at the campaign office. You put in the time. It was personal for you. And you gave all that you could to support our campaign. Because of your efforts, get this, we raised an historic $1.4 billion, almost $1.5 billion from grassroots supporters alone, the most in presidential campaign history. Nearly 8 million donors contributed an average donation of about $56 to fuel our people-powered campaign. And understand that the work that we did included the work that so many of you here did, which is to talk to first-time voters. Many of you are first-time voters. And to talk about how being involved can make a difference. And that remains true. And that's one of the pieces that I just want us to please take away, that our fight for freedom and for opportunity and for the promise of America, it included, for example, nearly almost 4 million first-time contributors to our campaign because of the work you did of helping people know that they can be engaged and that they're not outside, that they're inside, that we're all in this together. And that work continues. The work must continue of reminding ourselves that we have an ability to stay engaged in a way that will make a difference. The work that you all did, it's going to have lasting effect. Again, I'll say, the election didn't turn out like we wanted it to. Certainly not as we planned for it to. But understand that the work we put into it was about empowering people. That's the spirit with work we did. Our spirit and our work was about saying that it is a strength that we each have to lift people up, as opposed to beating people down. It is a strength we have that has lasting effect. So all that work that you did that was about engaging with other people, engaging with perfect strangers and in their face seeing a neighbor, that has lasting effect. It reminds people that there are leaders like you who care and will bring us together. And sometimes in the darkest moments, people lose faith in that. Are there people out there that feel that way? And you reminded people that yes, there are, and there are a lot of us. And that strength cannot be taken from us. That is our strength. It cannot be taken from us. So listen, as I said the day after the election, I still strongly believe the light of America's promise will burn bright as long as we never give up and we keep fighting. And the fight that fueled our campaign, a fight for freedom and opportunity, that did not end on November 5th. A fight for the dignity of all people, that did not end on November 5th. A fight for the future, a future in which all people receive the promise of America? No. A fight that is about a fight for the ideals of our nation, the ideals that reflect the promise of America, that fight's not over. So look, we still have a lot to fight for, okay? A future where every American can pursue their dreams, ambitions, and aspirations, where the women of America have the right to make decisions about their own body, not their government telling them what to do. Our fight for the rule of law, for freedom for all, for equal justice, for the sacred principle that everyone, no matter where they start out, has certain fundamental rights and freedoms that must be upheld. That's not over. That fight's still in us, and it burns strong. And I know this is an uncertain time. I'm clear-eyed about that. I know you're clear-eyed about it. And it feels heavy. And I just have to remind you, don't you ever let anybody take your power from you. You have the same power that you did before November 5th. And you have the same purpose.
Stone Cold Trump.
And you have the same ability to engage and inspire. So don't ever let anybody or any circumstance take your power from you. Look, this mission that we have, it takes hard work. But as you've heard me say many times, we like hard work. Hard work is good work. Hard work can be joyful work. And in doing our work, we will remain committed and intentional about building community, building coalitions, reminding people that we all have so much more in common than what separates us. We will be armed with the faith and the fuel that tells us what is possible and then drives us to achieve it. So let's continue to organize and mobilize and stay engaged. And I thank you all. I thank you all. We are all in this together. All right? We are all in this together. And on this practical eve of Thanksgiving, I wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving with the ability and to find the ability at this moment to just remember there is so much to be thankful for. And so I wish for you that you are surrounded by the people you love and who love you. As you know, I encourage you to be around family in whatever way you compose that family, but to take a moment and just reflect on all the good you have done and all the good you have yet to do. We are powerful, those of us who love our country, and we got a lot of work to do.
Harris and her top campaign staff speaking out at length for the first time since conceding the election to President-elect Donald Trump. And amid all the soul searching to figure out where it all went wrong, it seems like they're in absolutely complete denial about what led to the vice president's defeat. Because across the board, the Harris team came off as a group that's very quick to point fingers and kind of reluctant to look in the mirror and accept that the blame may fall squarely on them. And that includes the candidate who addressed supporters last night on a video conference call for roughly 10 minutes, thanking them for donating more than $1 billion total to her campaign. And during her remarks, the vice president served up the kind of word salad for which she's drawn mockery in the past.
But I am proud of the race we ran. And your role in this was critical.
Yeah, Kamala got on there looking like a drunk grandma. And she didn't just raise $1 billion. Her campaign raised nearly $1.5 billion, the most ever in history. Now, most of that money came from billionaires and millionaires too, but they keep lying, acting like the money mostly came from the grassroots.
Get this, we raised an historic $1.4 billion, almost $1.5 billion from grassroots supporters alone, the most in presidential campaign history.
I'm not really sure what that means. And as for this supposed unprecedented accomplishments, can we face it? The Harris campaign didn't provide a great return on its $1 billion investment. Sure, Kamala Harris was put in a tough spot, right? By being thrust into the top spot on the ticket just over 3 months out. But the fact is, the vice president just couldn't connect with the swing voters that she needed to put her over the top. And a big part of it was the campaign's failure to communicate. And while part of that falls on a clearly imperfect messenger, there are a lot of other questions about how the message was distributed. You know, Kamala Harris was radio silent for roughly the first half of her campaign. And when she finally did give interviews, she mostly stayed away from the major networks and focused instead on podcasts and other more targeted media hits, such as the popular women's theme podcast called Her Daddy. That was designed to reach her base, though, rather than independents. In an interview on Pod Save America yesterday, Harris campaign chair Jen O'Malley Dillon defended this preaching to the choir strategy.
We should have signaled more of our strategy early on about podcasts and who we were trying to reach. But we had a limited amount of time to reach the people we're trying to reach, and we were trying to go to them. But being up against a narrative that we weren't doing anything or we were afraid to have interviews is completely bull.
Is it? Is it really? I mean, as Harris herself noted, it was a 107-day campaign, and she didn't really talk to the media for the first 39 of them, excuse me. And then she finally sat down for an interview with CNN in late August. But all the while, the Trump campaign was just bombarding the airwaves with ads defining her before she could really even define herself. So if you thought you were going to get some self-reflection from the vice president and her team, you really didn't get it. So are they in denial? Well, we got a great panel here to discuss that and other hot topics facing the Democrats. Right now, I am joined by Roma Daravi, former White House Deputy Director of Strategic Communications under Donald Trump, founder of Daravi Strategies, Lindy Lee, Kamala Harris surrogate and a DNC National Finance Committee member, Nomiki Konste, former Bernie Sanders surrogate who served as a DNC Unity Commission member after the 2016 election, and David Paleologos, political pollster and the director of the Suffolk University Political Research Center. Thank you all for being here, especially on Thanksgiving Eve. Really appreciate it. Nomiki, I'm going to start with you. When you're listening to Jen O'Malley Dillon and these other top Harris campaign staffers, are they just fooling themselves here, defending their media strategy? It didn't work.
I want to give them a little room. Yes, the time period, 107 days, not the best situation. And they were fighting a machine. They were fighting a unified Republican Party. They were fighting Donald Trump, the most famous man in the world, who's been spreading his message for at least the last 8 years, but definitely the last 40 years. They were fighting super PACs and billions of dollars and a media landscape, digital and other media, that was really working against her.
Wait a damn minute.
Wait, hold up. She was fighting a machine. No, y'all not about to come in here and scam us again. This woman is up here attempting to redefine or rewrite the script that we all saw play out already. Kamala wasn't fighting no machine. The machine was fighting on behalf of Kamala. Remember the first 40 days and 40 nights? I talked about that. That lady was running from the media. She wouldn't fight anybody. Instead, she had mainstream media fighting for her. And listen, they fought for her around the clock, 24/7, all of them. ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, CNN, all of them gave her 90% to 100% positive coverage. Every radio station, they had all of them on lock. Then George Soros went and bought 200 more of them. That's why you heard all of these ads and you heard all of these local personalities basically acting like they were a part of the campaign. If you look at the digital space, she had the Shade Room fighting for her. Roland Martin was fighting for her. You had all these groups of black men raising millions of dollars for her, running around talking about protecting her. And it was the black women who kicked it off first, raising millions of dollars for her. They went around bragging about this for weeks. This was all pushed out on the Jumbotron. She had the Breakfast Club in her pocket. Ricky Smiley, D.L. Hughley, Steve Harvey, all these people stumped for her. She 100% dominated black radio. And this lying witch up here is saying that Kamala had to fight against money from PACs? Nah, Kamala raised more money than any candidate in history. Her campaign alone raised almost $1.5 billion. She said it herself. Not only that, you had outside PACs ran by these groups like a workers' union headed up by this black woman right here, who said they raised $200 million on their own to support Kamala Harris with their own political PAC. So yeah, this lie that this manipulative flamingo is trying to put out right now is straight up crazy. She's obviously trying to cover for her thieving, scamming friends in the DNC because Kamala wasn't fighting no machine. She was the machine.
And she had, a little over 100 days to make her message known. And I think given what we know with the final results, it came down to a couple percentage. It wasn't enough. With that being said, we had some lessons in 2016 that we learned. You mentioned I was on this Unity Reform Commission. That was essentially a 2-year process to examine where the Democratic Party went wrong in wasting over $1 billion, lighting it on fire, and not knowing enough to go to a state like Wisconsin. Right. A lot of those lessons were learned. But the lessons that weren't were things like, having a Democratic Party that's a full-time party. Because if you have a DNC that is a full-time party, you are spreading that message every single day. You are going into every single community and you are talking to organizers, you're training organizers, you're training the next generation of leadership on your message.
And see, she's going the same route that you normally see Roland Martin, Angela Rye, and all them going. This Dean Bat Airhead chick is saying the lesson is the DNC should be full time, meaning they should hire everyone and pay them all this money as permanent full time employees and use those hours and manpower to teach or indoctrinate everyone at large with their messages. The same agenda that's obviously not in the best interest of Americans. Nah, she's not saying the problem is their lack of agenda or their failing policies. She's saying the problem is not paying people year round to distribute their message. These people are complete clowns. And if this is the type of people Kamala was listening to, well, we see why she lost. These folks are dumb and totally out of touch with reality.
And I know Jen O'Malley Dillon, she was the chair of the Unity Reform Commission I was on. She knows those lessons very well. She was part of the report that we issued to the DNC members that they voted for, but the DNC did not enact them. The DNC chairs. And why is that? And this is where it gets harsh. Those consultants you just mentioned are the ones who make all the money off of these contracts in the presidential races, which do not go to state parties.
So I want to have Roma jump in on this. Give her perspective on what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, respectfully, Kamala Harris did not have just a little over 100 days to run for president. She had 4 years as the vice president to support Joe Biden as president. And she said it herself on The View, famously, we ran the ads, that she would not have done a single thing differently. With that said, the American people polled were still saying that they have no idea where she stands on any particular issue that was important to them going into the polls. She flip-flopped back and forth on every single policy under the sun, and that didn't help her either. I mean, Kamala Harris is her own worst surrogate, and meanwhile, President Trump is his own best surrogate. We're seeing today he's made history already before even becoming president and taking the White House and going into the Oval Office. He's making deals with our great ally, Mexico, and we're making progress on closing the southern border. So, I mean,
you mentioned something really interesting
from the Democrats are not going to stop here.
These people won't learn their lesson. Look, the lady raised not $1 billion, but nearly $1.5 billion and still ended up $20 million in debt. Then she still got these political ops in the DNC saying the answer to solve the problem of their obvious failure is to pay workers more money. Just like how Angela Rye was crying about them needing to give Black political sellouts more money. No, the problem is actually listening. They know exactly what the people want. But instead of giving the people what they want to tell us what we should want. No, it doesn't work like that. You're the public servant. You work for us. And you have Black women who voted for these people 92%, and these folks did nothing for the Black community at large. I see some of them literally jumping for joy for fake Black tokens getting jobs. When we all know these sellouts, they don't do anything for Black people once they get the job. It's all one big finesse. Let's go ahead and get the conversation started. Tell me what you think about this below. Shout out to
Deck with Tim Black.
Tim, why you calling out another Black man, Tim? When we hurt we call out we. While I was busy going at Roland Martin, and rightly so. He deserves all the smoke. There was somebody I left out at that time. You guessed it, Al Sharpton.
A lot of Democratic candidates, their consultants, played to the edges and the younger vote and ignored Black churches, ignored Black fraternities.
He also deserved a lot of ridicule. Do you realize that Al Sharpton took $500,000 for his foundation from Kamala Harris, and then he interviewed her?
Kamala Harris.
Now, Roland took $350,000, more than anybody ever gave his ass for his crummy ass network. In fact, Al Sharpton is probably still mad that she only gave him $150,000 more than she gave Roland. He like, I'm MSNBC. How you gonna give his dumb asses? No offense, Roland, but you suck. I mean, come on.
Well, thank you for allowing us on your birthday to sit down and talk.
Of course, Rep.
Now, this is just one reason why MSNBC got to go bye-bye. And I don't care if Elon buys them or not. They got to go. Al Sharpton continues to host MSNBC's show, make regular appearances after Harris campaign payment is revealed. This is why they got to go. United News Agency. Al Sharpton has continued to make guest appearances on the network in addition to hosting his weekend show after revelations that his nonprofit took money from Kamala Harris before he interviewed her. A whopping $500,000 to Sharpton's National Action Network nonprofit. MSNBC employs Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton, representing MSNBC, takes money for his own organization, not affiliated with MSNBC, then interviews Vice President Harris. You don't think that that's a conflict? You don't think people would need to know? By the way, she gave me $500,000 to my nonprofit. You know what I'm saying? Because we great people, you know. You don't think that the viewers needed to know that? And you don't think there shouldn't be any repercussions for that? None? Nothing's supposed to happen with this obvious conflict of interest? I mean, this is as glaring as it gets. As glaring, obvious. This is unethical. It may even be illegal. This is as close to payola as possible. The only mitigating thing about it that lessens the payola aspect is that, you know, Al Sharpton is a scumbag anyway, and he is in the tank for her to begin with. That's the only thing. But besides that, it still looks like money that was given that would influence a favorable or a soft, gentle interview. How could you not see that as a bad thing? I saw Al Sharpton on something today. Like nothing's going on, just...
The fact that he wants to be liked is what many narcissists always want.
Looking all dead in the face, doing what he normally do. You know what I'm saying? Lying his ass off, pointing fingers at other people, grandstanding on some other issues. Meanwhile, he has nothing to stand on. The man is as unethical as they come. Once again, we got morons who believe in him. They think Al's doing it for us. Al, that's because he takes an issue that matters to you. He collects money through it, goofy. Says things that anyone could say, and then goes back to being a corrupt bastard. Not unlike Dr. Umar. Same type of people. A lot of people do this. In my opinion, Sharpton was an open supporter, obvious supporter of Kamala Harris. He made no doubt about that in anybody's mind. That made it bad enough that he's going to interview her. But then he took money too. And I want to let anybody know who's wondering, like, Tim, why are you trying to take money out Al's pocket? Tim, why are you calling out another black man, Tim? When we hurt we call out we. Okay? Al Sharpton ain't hurting white people with the dumb shit he does. He ain't corralling white people. White people don't listen to Al. I mean, maybe that one guy, the guy Jesse, whatever is the Dolomite or whatever his name is. Maybe him and that fat guy that always talking about race all the time, and Tim Wise, these guys. Okay, but most white people don't listen to him. So who is he lying to? Black people. So who should call him out? Black people. Stop looking at him and saying, well, Tim, you shouldn't do it because he's black. Well, if I don't call him out, who will? Sure as hell ain't going to be the white guys. Sure ain't going to be Jack Huger and David Packman and Sam Sausagehead, Cedar. These people are not going to call him out. Who's going to call him out? If the right-wing people like Tim Pool Benny Johnson, any of these people call him out, Cernovich, any of these people call him out, you're going to call him racist. That's what you do. You call him racist. So, and then the moderate, the Democrat liberals, they ain't going to say shit because they agree with him. Like, that's their boy. They support him because he supports candidates they want him to support. They're all in cahoots with each other. They're all corrupt. Then the progressive types, or people that say they're progressive, they actually supported Kamala. So they also ain't gonna call him out. So ain't nobody left but independent black folks and white folks, and even independent white folks will have problems because you'll call them racist too because they white. And so the only thing left are independent black people to stand up. And you won't be able to call me racist, but you'll call me a sellout, a coon, and all this other stuff. For calling out black people that are hurting black people. You think it helps us when he runs around shouting about racism all day, put money in his pocket? Being a scumbag. And if you think when he became an informant back in the 70s, 80s, you think he didn't know what he was doing. Well, I was just trying to help the feds do their thing. So we ain't talking about a stand-up individual to begin with. When I found that out about him, I'm like, yeah. But that ain't the bottom line. The bottom line is this. I call out who I want. Don't like it, watch another show. Recognize it ain't, it's like Cat said, man. Cat Williams, get Cat Williams a show. I don't know if he got time to do it, but give him a show. I know he's building his own enterprise, his own movie set, his own movie kingdom, I think. He's doing his thing. So he wouldn't do it. But he said it best. He said, it's not white versus white. It's not white versus black. It's good versus evil. And that's any color, man. This ain't about because it's about good versus evil. And that's what I'm talking about. What Al Sharpton did here was evil. What Roland Martin did was evil. And I'm staying on them. I'm staying on their necks, man. And I'm calling out these people. It's the day. Look, we're at a point right now where we can break through. They're going to do their best to silence people like me. Right now, this is an opportunity. So I got to put everything into this. You don't know it, but I'm fighting for you. As you criticize me for criticizing people that have been on the take. He's been on the take 30 years, man. Has your life gotten better under this guy? He's been a leader in the community for 30 years. Have our lives gotten better? Has the racial wealth gap closed?
No, Tim, to your point, the racial wealth gap in the United States has not closed. In fact, it's significantly grown over the last 30 years, with the disparity between white and black households consistently widening, meaning white families hold substantially more wealth compared to black families. This trend is evident in data from the Survey of Consumer Finances across several decades.
What's gone down for us that was bad and what's gone up that was good? What has happened under these people? How have they benefited us? Then why we can't let them go? Why we can't let them get out? Kamala Harris is more of the same of what we don't need. And this guy was willing to take her money and boost her and give her that soft-ass interview. He got a complete staff. He ain't like Tim Black. I interview people. It's just me, goofy. He got a whole team of people and all the resources of MSNBC behind him. He couldn't ask better questions than a third grader. Really? You don't think that was intentional? During the interview, Sharpton wished Harris a happy birthday and likened her to revered Democrat Shirley Chisholm. Arrest my case. He's a kiss ass. He kissed the ass during the entire thing. We got to be willing to call out those who are hurting us. Al Sharpton is one of those people. Him and Roland Martin are two people that keep black people on the Democratic plantation, and it does not help us. It helps them. Time to change up. It's a new day. All right, hit the like button, guys.
Ho-Ho's, New York, Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and only jimmydore.com. What's the effect of that public relations nightmare? I mean, I've heard reports that their economy is cratering and there's a brain drain right now that people are leaving Israel. Is I, I have a hard time believing that Israel will somehow be drastically changed, or this won't be a problem forever. What do you think?
Well, they're borrowing so much to finance these wars, this endless war. And while they're getting a lot from the United States taxpayer, as always, it's distorted their economy. The Israeli central bank's going to have to keep raising rates. Israel's economy is heavily, heavily reliant on foreign direct investment. It's one of the main sources of sustaining its middle class, upper middle class, and upper class is the tech industry. Israel markets itself as sort of the startup nation. And being at war has fueled tech investment. But at this point, foreign direct investment for the Israeli tech industry has collapsed. And it's unclear if it's going to come back. You also have had like the small business class suffer a huge hit because small businessmen have had to actually fight. If they're under the age of 40, they've had to fight in these wars, and they're serving 3 tours, 4 tours, and their businesses have collapsed. I mean, there's so many factors. A lack of tourism. Israel's heavily dependent on tourism, and tourists are afraid to go there. So then the state has had to pay to house all these people, first from the south and then from the north of the country, who are displaced from their homes. So they've been just pumping money into the like just paying for hotels and housing the same way they did during the COVID event. There's so many economic hits coming at Israel all at once, and life looks much better for anyone who has a second passport in a place like Germany than it does there. Israel is the most dangerous place on the planet to be a Jew. And so why would you want to stay there? It's puzzling to me. The only thing keeping a lot of people there is nationalism, messianism. And that's why poll after poll shows that the happiest people in Israel with the highest rates of approval of their leadership are the religious nationalist fanatics who are settling the West Bank and have the most genocidal mentality towards Palestinians. That's the future of this state.
So, I mean, they're going to, you say that they've signaled they're going to annex the West Bank. Don't they, again, fill me in on this, but I just figured they already pretty much, they control the West Bank, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
they control it militarily, and then you have the Palestinian Authority, which is basically an occupation subcontractor.
Yeah.
And they control the major cities, but they can't do anything to resist Israel.
Right. So
if they annex the West Bank, it's apartheid. It's a mask-off moment for apartheid. They take responsibility for the Palestinian population. That means, according to international law, they have to feed the population. They have to pay their salaries. They have to provide them water. And that's the quandary Israel finds itself in Gaza, where it said, we're going to totally destroy Hamas. We're going to kill like anyone associated with Hamas, even the municipal authorities, the police. And they've created this Mad Max hellhole in Gaza right now. Israel's actually supporting ISIS-related gang leaders and drug dealers to loot the aid trucks to prevent aid from reaching the population in the north. This is confirmed. And it's doing so it can say that it had no responsibility for the aid not reaching its target. And then it's going to have these kinds of figures take over. It's going to be a complete catastrophe. But Israel will do anything to have it both ways, to be able to take territory, occupy territory, and not have any responsibility for the civilian population, which is what it had before the rise of the Palestinian Authority. And I don't know how they're going to do that.
So, the whole UN has turned on Israel. I mean, it seems like the world is against it, except the United States gets to veto any UN resolution. I've heard some of my Jewish friends speak about how, decades and decades after World War II, when they would go through Germany, through Europe, and they would be in hostels, and the people who were from Germany were still embarrassed. They were still associated with being Nazis.
Yeah.
And do you think that that will happen to people associated with Israel? Do you think that will happen to Jewish people, that they will be shunned like Nazis were shunned after World War II?
Well, Israelis and Jews are two separate things in many cases. I mean, you have the Jewish
Yes.
diaspora. You have a J Street poll showing that a majority of American Jews actually favor some form of an arms embargo to Israel in order to stop this war. Majority of American Jews oppose war with Iran. So it's not as though all Jews can be held collectively responsible for this, but Israel wants them to be.
Right.
By its nature, it poses as the Jewish state, and it is inflaming anti-Semitism, and it wants to implicate all Jews in its crimes, just as anti-Semites do, and it's working. And I see it more and more online with people just dropping the whole opposition to Zionism and going after Jews directly. Israel wants that, and it serves Zionism because Israel can then say the whole world is against Jews. We need this state to protect them, and it needs to be armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons, and we need to slaughter everyone who opposes us. That's playing out. But what we're also seeing is that Israelis who go to European cities and actually try to intimidate people waving Palestinian flags during soccer competitions, football matches, sending their thugs in the street. They can't get away with it. They're used to doing that in Israel, that level of entitlement and violent, sadistic, psychotic behavior. They're used to getting away with it within the frontiers, the walled off frontiers of their Spartan Jewish version of Jonestown. But they couldn't get away with it in Amsterdam. And local youth, Muslim youth, whooped their asses when they tried to do that. And then they went and cried pogrom and pretended like they were Anne Frank, and the whole media went along with it. But no one who was following social media or paying attention to what was happening actually believed that side of the story. So Israelis themselves are going to be pariahs wherever they go, as long as they insist on acting like thugs and hooligans like they do when they go into Gaza. And Netanyahu himself has to be afraid of entering any country that signed on to the Rome Statute because there's an arrest warrant for him. And this is unprecedented, along with his defense minister. Obviously, there should be thousands more arrest warrants for the pilots who are blowing up homes filled with families and children in Gaza, for the officers, so many soldiers videotaping themselves wearing women's lingerie in homes where they had displaced the residents or killed them and destroyed their belongings. Of course, there should be more, but we're in a new era now where the ICC and all of these multilateral institutions that were built up after World War II, after the Holocaust, to prevent this from happening again, realized that if they didn't issue an arrest warrant for Netanyahu, or if the International Court of Justice didn't rule that genocide was taking place, if sanctions aren't going to come down, then this whole international order is hollow and completely hypocritical, because they've already gone after Putin for all that in Ukraine. Are they just tools of the United States, or do they actually follow the law and see what the rest of us are seeing? And they've had to defend their credibility, so it's isolating Israel, it's isolating the United States as well. The US run world order died on October 7th, and it's never coming back.
Did you see the Washington Post, their article about? Yeah. It was comical. They're saying that the ICC, they shouldn't be indicting. That's the wrong thing for them to indict and put out a warrant for Netanyahu, because that then compromises them, and then we need the ICC to go after Putin and to go after people in Africa, but don't go after Israel. It's just like, well, then exactly what you just said. Now the game is over. The mask is off, and they're going to be seen as a complete tool and puppet of the United States. They're not an actual justice body. They're just a goon squad then, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's no clear winner or loser between Israel and Hezbollah. Neither side achieved a clear victory, but we're looking at a larger war. It's not just a military war, and Israel's image has always been central to its ability to deter attacks, to its overall strategy, and its image is fatally damaged. It is destroyed, and unfortunately, for any Jew who has tried to oppose this monstrous project, we see the symbol of our own faith community being turned by it into a new swastika. And that's part and parcel of the declining, disastrous project of Zionism, still kind of managing to persist thanks to an endless supply of U.S. bombs from Genocide Joe, and Donald Trump is pledged to send even more weapons. And there's a new, I think there's a new like $250 million arms package being rushed to Israel right now.
Come see us doing live shows. We'll be in Los Angeles, Honolulu, Baltimore, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, Providence.
Remember last week we covered on the show how that woman sued Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and she was forced to get the vaccine, and she said she wouldn't do it, so they fired her as a result of it. Well, now she's won a multi-million-dollar lawsuit as a result, and I'm hoping that this opens up the floodgates to be able to go after these companies and the biopharmaceutical complex for this very reason. Well, Tucker Carlson responded to this woman winning this massive lawsuit and said he was excited about this. And he went on a bit of like a 3-minute rant here, which I think is amazing, specifically about an end to the vaccine liability shields that these vaccine manufacturers have in place. We've talked about this here on the show, that you can't go after these biopharmaceutical companies because the government has given them like blanket immunity shields. Tucker says it is time to end that right now. Listen.
Jury in Michigan just awarded a woman fired for not taking the vax millions of dollars. And I hope that that is a nationwide trend where everyone whose life was destroyed in that fit of lies and hysteria is made whole. I really hope so. And I do hope that Congress can immediately strip the blanket immunity from the vaccine makers. I don't understand that. I've sold products my whole life. I mean, imagine you have a product, you convince politicians to force the population to buy your product. Anyone who complains gets fired, and you can't be sued. I'm sorry. And I'm not attacking vaccines, by the way. I'm sure there are fine vaccines. I don't know. I'm not taking any of them, but it's okay if other people do. I'm not mad about people taking vaccines. I'm not mad about vaccines. But that's a scam. And anyone who says it's not a scam can just explain to me how it's not a scam. How is that not a scam? You're not allowed to sue? You can sue anybody for anything in this country. Anything. It's why we don't have playgrounds anymore. Because people made remember merry-go-rounds? Remember those? Is anyone old enough to remember a merry-go-round? They don't exist. They were awesome. I have like 10 friends who have fewer teeth than they were born with because of merry-go-rounds. But they have stronger spirits because they were great. They don't exist anymore because the trial bar decided we're going to get rich suing merry-go-round makers and people who were nice enough to build playgrounds. It's like so many good things in American life have been eliminated by the greed of the trial bar. By the way, next time in the Caribbean, go down to the yacht basin, wherever you are, it doesn't matter what island you are, and look at the biggest boats and just ask like the boat guys and the matching polo shirts with the yacht names on them, like, what does the owner of this boat do for a living? And just keep a list of how many of them are trial lawyers, like a lot. it was the tobacco settlement or asbestos or whatever. It was talcum powder or whatever case they were. And I'm not attacking all lawyers, though I want to, because I do hate them with a passion. But even if I liked lawyers, I would say, how is it that there's this one category that's exempt from the risk that all the rest of us who are involved in any kind of business face every single? I have liability insurance on my house in case the UPS guy slips delivering a package from Amazon. But somehow Albert Bourla and all the other creepy billionaires who run these disgusting pharma companies are in no danger of being sued because their corrupt pals in Congress in 1986 gave them blanket immunity? Like, let's tear that down immediately. Oh, well, we can't compete. Well, why don't you just make a safer vaccine then? How's that sound? Why don't you face the same risk that every other person who conducts any other kind of commerce or lives in this country faces every single day? Oh, we can't. Oh, shut up. Go away. And so that's the first thing. I don't even know how I got off on that, but I'm so mad about it. It's so crazy.
I love it. I think it brings up in 1986, they give this blanket immunity.
Mm-hmm.
They can rush these things to market with no clinical trials.
Yeah.
Push it on the American people, and then you have no recourse.
Right.
Think about the amount, and it's because it's for public safety.
Yeah.
Right. It's for our safety that we have these blanket immunities.
We've covered it. How many in increasing volume, how many medicines or treatments or vaccines have been pushed to market with either emergency use authorization or fast tracked. Most recently, the RSV vaccine for pregnant women and elderly people, fast tracked. Why? Why is that we don't have mass deaths in those communities? So yeah, that is happening.
If you suffer from daily pain, I need you to listen to this message very carefully. What we know about pain relief is changing forever. As we age, aches and pains are normal, and we're all searching for effective ways to relieve pain without side effects and addiction. Let's be frank, we've all seen the horrors of the opioid crisis. You may even be affected personally. Your family might know someone that has been affected by this. That's where a pioneering medical scientist comes in, Clint Winters. You may have seen the world-renowned health expert featured in the national media. He's unveiled a natural pain reliever that has taken the world by storm. And I'm talking about Canolidine, the 100% drug-free way to get full-body pain relief without dangerous pills. As you read this right now, Canolidine has become the go-to pain reliever for over 1 million Americans, hundreds of professional athletes. It was even named as the UFC's #1 official pain reliever for the UFC. Right now, you guys can try it. Go to trycano.com/redacted, and you're going to get it for less than $1 per day. You can access the only Canolidine product in the world for less than $1 per day. Clint has provided this special link for you guys. You can guys get this special discount. Just go to trycano.com/redacted. I see a bunch of people in the chat who've already ordered this. Give it a shot. If you suffer from chronic pain, you don't want to have that addiction from drugs, try kano.com/redacted, the 100% drug-free Canolidine. Try it for less than $1 a day. Well, the crooked Food and Drug Administration is about to be flipped on its head. Instead of partnering with big pharma and keeping healthy supplements off store shelves, it looks like they are about to be flipped upside down now that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to be heading up the FDA, the CDC, and all of America's health system. He tweeted this right after President Trump announced that he would head up the HHS. FDA's war on public health is about to end. This includes its aggressive suppression of psychedelics, peptides, stem cells, raw milk, hyperbaric therapies. I mean, some of this stuff I can't even pronounce, on and on and on. And he says anything else that advances human health and can't be patented by big pharma. If you work for the FDA and are part of this corrupt system, I have two messages for you. Number one, preserve your records. And number two, pack your bags. Well, friend of the show, Antonio Calamares, is from Black Forest Supplements. And of course, we've been watching his battle. He's been battling the FDA for the past couple of years because they've been trying to turn some of his natural supplements into a drug classification so big pharma can try to make a lot of money off of this. And we wanted to invite Antonio back on the show now that this news has dropped to get your take on what this means for you and the future of the healthcare industry in the country. Antonio, great to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Clayton, thank you. Pleasure being here. And I couldn't be happier. I think the American public chose the right candidate, and I'm super happy with the RFK nomination as well.
So just so our audience understands this, and you guys have been a longtime supporter of what we've done here on Redacted for a number of years, and you have a product called NMN, and basically the FDA was going after you guys, and you guys aren't alone. Like, we featured other individuals that the FDA is going after, natural companies we featured here on the show, that the FDA is trying to change your classification. Can you explain to our audience what, first of all, the product does, and why was the FDA going after you?
Yeah, I think that the FDA actively suppresses anything that could be beneficial for human health and can be patented by Big Pharma. The reason for this is, as I talked about it earlier on the show last time I was here, they're in bed with the big pharmaceutical companies that they're supposed to be regulating. I'll throw out just a stat so people get an idea. Every single FDA commissioner ever since 2000, after his FDA tenure, has gone on to become either a consultant or work for a big pharmaceutical company, every single one. So what happened with NMN is that they're trying to create the first prescription anti-aging drug, and they were looking for, okay, what could be this anti-aging compound that's strong enough to be classified as a drug. So they came after our star product, which is NMN. Quite quickly, I'll mention how it works. NMN is an NAD plus precursor, and NAD plus is something that we have in our blood that slows down as we age. As we age, we have less NAD plus. And what Harvard researchers found was that by supplementing NMN, one can keep our NAD plus levels in our blood high, and that would lead us to age more gracefully, have more energy, reduce weight, cholesterol. And for over 2 years now, as you mentioned, we've been fighting a class action suit against Big Pharma. We partnered up alongside the NPA, the Natural Product Association, and because they were coming after NMN that was previously available as a supplement, and they were trying to turn it into a drug. And thankfully, I was 2 days after they announced the new administration. I'm pretty sure it had something to do with that. But the court ruled that the FDA was unfairly enforcing its rule against NMN products. And until the suit, until the case gets settled, they can't come after companies that are selling NMN. So I think that is a huge win for the American people. And I think that it's a huge win for letting the American people choose what's best for their health without Big Pharma being the middleman.
I'm sure you probably deal with a lot of other health companies that are in the similar situation, that have healthy supplements that the FDA is trying to regulate, trying to get their hands on in order to profit, and that Big Pharma can then make their own drug version of it and make billions of dollars off of it. What do you think this means more broadly for the supplement industry, for people that want to get some of these healthy products in their life?
What I love about the new administration is that they advocate for health freedom. Why is this important? It's because if we don't have health freedom, we're just going to see COVID 2.0 over and over again. We saw what they did there. They suppressed anything that could potentially help people, and they labeled it as misinformation or pseudoscience, or they labeled people as anti-vaxxers. Rather than seeing the data, studying what could be best and most affordable in order to treat the disease, the only real solution was that the one they invented, the one they had patented, and they were going to make the most money off of. And I think even now, there's drugs that they recommend to treat COVID, like Paxlovid, and that is a 5-day prescription, which they charge $1.6K for. So you're telling me that you're trying to make people, as many people as healthy as you can, and you charge 1.6K for a 5-day prescription. So the flip side of this is not having health freedom, leaving everything in the hands of big pharma, and getting crazy prescription prices like the one I just mentioned, rather than being informed, doing our own research, allowing the public to sort of dictate what's best for their health, and yeah, really finding those hidden solutions that don't have that big pharma paywall behind them. So that would be the flip side.
You bring up a great point. I mean, as it relates to COVID, I mean, they mocked people like President Trump for hydroxychloroquine. These were, by the way, you can't make any money off of them, right? So that's the thing, right? That's how big pharma can't. They don't want this promoted because you can't make money off of ivermectin. You can't make money off of hydroxychloroquine. And of course, Dr. Peter McCullough, a good friend of the show, this was a protocol that he was finding great results with his patients in Texas. And big pharma stepped in and censored it. And if we even mentioned those words on YouTube or, on social media, you were blocked, you were banned. Like, that's how big pharma is, that they managed to get them to censor people talking about ivermectin, Jimmy Kimmel making fun of it, calling it horse paste, on television. And they have, their tentacles are far and wide. So we couldn't even do stories about that stuff here. That's how deeply corrupt these people are.
And you mentioned television. I think that 80% of the revenues from the mainstream media actually come from drug advertisements. So mainstream media, you can't really trust anything when it comes to making informed decisions about your health. Independent media, it's another thing, but you saw they could also control that with labeling it as misinformation. Mark Zuckerberg came out admitting that he was actively suppressing things because the FBI or the government told them to do so. So mainstream media, they already have completely under control. And during COVID, they also controlled non-mainstream media. So I'm eager that this new administration is here, and hopefully we can put some parameters so that this doesn't happen again.
Well, I'll get you out of here in a second, Antonio, but what's next for you guys in this battle? Where do you guys stand right now with the FDA?
Right now, we are hopeful that with the new administration, RFK is really not going to allow big pharmaceutical companies to patent such a powerful drug. We're still in the class action suit. It's been put on hold until there's a final decision. And but I really think that with this administration, we're going to start seeing NMN back on Amazon, NMN back in the retail shelves, because as I said, it's so powerful that if it wasn't, they wouldn't be trying to make it the first prescription anti-aging drug. We have hundreds of thousands of customers that literally live by this compound. I take it myself, and I'm super happy that I think that this war is about to end. Hopefully, I'm not wrong, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for the future of the compound, and I'm hopeful for the future of health freedoms with this new administration.
It's a great anti-aging supplement. And I mean, you should look at Antonio. Antonio, I don't know if our audience knows this, you're 97 years old. So this is remarkable. I'm joking, of course. No, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. But hey, I know you guys are doing a big Black Friday deal, so I just want to promote this because I love you guys. You guys have been a big supporter of us here. We'll have a link in the description if anyone wants to pick up. You can buy one, get one free Black Friday deal. Is that right? Where can people? We'll have a link in the description, but is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Buy one, get one free, not just for NMN, which I highly recommend, but for all of our products. And I encourage people to buy one for themselves and maybe give one to a family member or give one to a loved one. That is why we always do this sort of deals, but never buy one, get one, because our margins aren't great there. This is a Black Friday only deal, so it's not going to be around for long. I encourage people to really take advantage of this deal.
All right. Antonio, great to see you, and good luck with this battle. This was
Kofi. Follow me.